Hello, Jacksonites. Oh, shit. Okay. Hello, Jacksonites, and welcome to not necessarily a series, but a new topic of videos that I've been wanting to do for the better part of almost a year now. I was inspired to do these kinds of videos through Cody Leach. I've been mentioning him a lot on my channel lately because admittedly I've been watching a lot of his videos lately. He has with him it's a series because he's done a lot of these videos at this point. These videos called 31 on 31, where at first it was kept to Halloween, but then he just started doing these videos on the 31st of any given month now. But it started out, he would review 31 movies on the 31st of October. The very first one that he ever did was he ranked all of the Halloween, Friday the 13th, and Nightmare on Elm Street movies in one giant list on Halloween. All of those franchises equaled up to 31 films, from worst to best. And since then, he has done, I think, 6 31 lists. After that, he did one that had Scream, Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Child's Play, Evil Dead, and the 2 collected movies. Then after that, he did an action movie edition with Die Hard, Rambo, Mission Impossible, the John Wick trilogy, the Bad Boys trilogy, and the Jason Bourne movies. I was inspired to do my own list, but I kind of ran into a bit of a dilemma. With a majority of his lists, I've seen most of the franchises, but there's the 1 or 2 exception where either I just haven't seen or I have no interest in. Take the second one that he did with Chucky and Evil Dead and Psycho and such. The one monkey wrench in that whole series for me to do is I have absolutely no interest in watching the Psycho movies. And I have no interest in fucking going down the rabbit hole of shitty Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies. So, ran into a little bit of a snag, but with the help of Trevor Boy here, who will be joining me today.
Howdy, everybody.
I decided to draw inspiration from my own shit, and I came up with our own list. Today, I'm not calling this 31 on 31. I'd like to, and if you were to actually watch this list on a day that is the 31st of a certain month, I guess you could. Me and Trevor Boy are going to be ranking the Alien, Predator, Terminator, RoboCop, and Tremors franchises all in one list. I had plans to do a re-review of the first 4 Terminator movies, which I still am going to be doing that. And I also had plans to review Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, which I am also still doing that. But I really wanted to do these 2 videos first because they're fresh in my mind and they're what I'm currently interested in doing. And I also feel like I need to watch Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy one more time before I give my thoughts on those movies because I'm not welcome in that fan base. But I figured this should be a lot of fun. There's a lot of films here. There's a lot of franchises here. So it should be a very, very interesting list to see how it turns out. And of course, me and Trev have similar tastes, but at that same time, we have very dissimilar tastes.
This is true. So it's probably going to be a little surprising where some of these fall whenever they're all put together in terms of rankings.
So to give a quick refresher, we will be including all 12 of the Alien and Predator films. We're not really going to talk too much about those because the last video that we did was ranking that whole series. We'll just give our quick thoughts. all 7 Tremors films plus the TV series, the original RoboCop trilogy plus the 2014 remake, all 6 Terminator films plus Terminator the Sarah Connor Chronicles as well. And I think that's it.
I think so too.
Yes, it is. All right.
But we'll find out regardless.
So, yes, we are including 2 TV shows in this list because if we just had the movies, we'd only have 29. And not to mention Tremors the series flows into the franchise very smoothly as well, and Sarah Connor Chronicles has a lot of elements from its previous Terminator movies that ebb and flow into that series as well. So, whatever. So this should be a lot of fun. I'm very excited to get into this.
As am I.
Alrighty. So, at the very bottom of the barrel, the absolute worst of of all 31 of these movies, of all of these franchises, should surprise absolutely nobody, as it is still Prometheus. I hated this movie. Not to repeat myself too much from my last list, I strongly dislike Prometheus. I don't like a single thing about it other than acknowledging the fact that it's well shot and it has a big budget and it has good special effects. But outside of that, there ain't a damn thing about this movie I like. I don't like any of the characters, which I totally forgot to mention in my last video. None of the characters are likable. It fucks with its own franchise's mythology. It asks a gigantic slew of questions that it refuses to answer and comes off as Ridley Scott really jerking off to his android fetishes instead of actually giving us a satisfying prequel to the Alien series. A prequel that nobody asked for, at least as far as I know. Prometheus still sucks ass. I don't like anything about it. Fuck this movie. And really, that's really the only movie on this entire list that pisses me off. There's a couple others on here that I do think are bad and are the weakest of these franchises, but Prometheus is the only one of this entire list that if it was on, I would just walk away. I would literally just rather twiddle my thumbs and sit there for 2 hours. Enough said, Trev.
My 31, and again, I'm not going to repeat myself too much because we kind of just talked about this one. My 31 is going to be Alien Resurrection.
Damn, you just don't like this movie, do you?
I don't hate it, but like I said in our review, it just feels distant from the first 3 movies. And again, I like some of the jokes, I like the effects, but I'm just never that inclined to revisit this one unless, like for our review series, you asked me to watch it again, and I did it for that. But of my own volition, no, not really. I mean, I look at this one and go, I'd rather watch one of the first 3. And I don't know, that's basically all I can say about it without repeating what we said in our review. And to be honest, we actually didn't say all that much about it in our review. We mostly talked about Alien 3. So, I mean... Because
there's just really not that fucking much to say about Resurrection.
Yeah, see? So it just goes to show... I mean, it has its fans. It actually has it has its own following, and at the time it was favored a little bit more than Alien 3, but that's just because Alien 3 was kind of a gut punch. Still is, but regardless, I don't know. It just, whenever I was thinking about all these movies, this is the one where I was like, yeah, I can pass on this one.
Fair enough. So coming in at number 30 is RoboCop 3. Yeah, I went back and I rewatched my review of RoboCop 3, and I've watched some other reviews of the movie, mainly Oliver Harper's review of RoboCop 3, which if you want to hear somebody give their case on every single aspect of why RoboCop 3 just does not work, watch Oliver Harper's review of RoboCop 3, because he beat for beat lists 100% exactly what is wrong with RoboCop 3. But to indulge it, I will explain why. It suffers from a low budget. RoboCop is not even a central character in his own movie. It's dull. It's boring. It's haphazardly paced. And it greatly suffers from the PG-13 rating, because it's very clear that the studio was so desperately trying to pander to children. Not nearly as much as another one that's coming up soon, but RoboCop 3 did have potential. But it just goes to show that Orion was so desperately trying to throw everything that they thought was going to work at this movie, and none of it stuck, which is why around the entire world, RoboCop 3 made only $10 million against a $22 million budget. And not only that, it was released during a crowded year, with Last Action Hero starring Arnold Schwarzenegger coming out on one side, which isn't highly regarded as one of Arnold's best movies, but it does still have a fan base. And then there was another little movie that was coming out in 1993 called Jurassic Park, which was dominating the entire world. So even if the movie had been released not during a crowded year, like say when it was originally supposed to come out in 1991, there would have been another little movie that would have come out called Terminator 2 that would have stolen its spotlight. So it just kind of seemed like this movie was doomed to fail from the start, had Orion just not decided to pussyfoot themselves and write themselves into a corner. Yeah, RoboCop 3 is a frustrating sit. What could have been would have been way better, but it just goes to show a strongly misguided studio attempt to turn something into what they perceived as what was selling, when in fact it was the minority.
Well, more on that in a little bit, because it's a little bit higher on my list, but not too much. So my number 30, and this is just going off the overall impact it seems the show made, even though it almost gave it away there by saying show. My 30 is going to be the Sarah Connor Chronicles. And the thing is that I haven't seen this show in years. And I remember somewhat enjoying it. It was scattered things about it that I liked. I kind of thought the idea, and this was like introduced like towards the end of the show in its second season. I liked the idea of a Protector liquid metal Terminator. I think she was called a T-2000?
T-1001.
1001, okay. But yeah, I kind of like that idea, because that would be quite an impressive Protector Terminator, having a liquid metal one on your side. I also like during the first season, the one Terminator who basically tried to repair himself. Well, repair is kind of giving the concept not a fair shake. He basically regrows his skin and whatnot. It forges like an entire different physical identity and everything. Wasn't he called John Henry?
John
like
Cromartie.
Okay, yeah. Anyway, I thought that was kind of cool. There was some neat effects going on there, and it was kind of creepy, particularly whenever he. I forgot how it was explained, but he regrew flesh like in a bathtub or something to that effect, and that was a very striking visual. That's always stuck with me. Oddly, probably the thing I remember most, aside from the T-1001, because there were some cool kills, or at least one cool kill with the T-1001, and also the whole forming like a shield to protect somebody. That was a good shot. Those are just a few scattered images that I remember. But other than that, there's not a whole lot about the show that was memorable. I mean, dramatically speaking, I guess there were some good scripts, but it just, at least based on that show, I don't feel like Terminator was served well by a television show. Maybe the anime on Netflix is probably going to do a better job. We'll see. Yeah, I don't know when that's coming, but it was announced.
That's a thing?
Yeah, the Terminator anime on Netflix is in the pipeline at some point. Yeah, so I guess the franchise isn't quite dead. We shall see. But yeah, I mean, I think I should revisit the Sarah Connor Chronicles at some point. I don't know when, but I do agree with some of the things that Nick has said about it, where the casting doesn't entirely fit, particularly Sarah Connor. But the show does have quite a following, surprisingly. And more power to them, because if they enjoy the show, I mean, I guess they can enjoy it. But yeah, because I don't have a whole lot of fresh thoughts on it, it just ended up as pretty much the second to last on my list. We're going to have to revive him, ladies and gentlemen.
Coming in at number 29 is Tremors, A Cold Day in Hell.
Oh, did you do your 30?
Yeah, that was RoboCop 3.
Oh, sorry. Continue.
29 is Tremors, A Cold Day in Hell. So once again, I re-listened to all of our Tremors reviews, all in one day when I was at work a couple weeks ago. And while our episode is fun to listen to because of how much I ripped this movie to pieces, yeah, all of my opinion still stands true. I almost agree with that one quote that said this movie is so bad it's almost unwatchable, and that it feels like it's made by people who absolutely hate Tremors. Yeah, it almost does feel like that at times, because almost everything that was set up in Tremors 5, as awesome as it was, it just feels like it was getting cut off at the knees in this movie. The piss humor overstays its welcome and just turns annoying. None of the characters are likable, not even Bert. He's just a giant grump fuck the entire film. There's not much monster action. It feels like a giant retread of the first film. The ass blasters are pointless. It fails utterly at showcasing an Arctic environment scenario. Fails. And it shows Cinemotion's political agenda, I'll say for lack of a better term, of just using the new Graboids design as, yeah, this is a new face of the franchise.
Yeah, pretty much, which sucks because they said that it was just specifically for a new breed, but as the next two films showed, it was just like, no, this is just our take on the creatures. So they should have just said that to start with.
Yeah, Tremors, A Cold Day in Hell is a frustrating sit as well. And it sucks. I hate to say that because this is probably my second favorite franchise of all of these 5 that we're talking about. And one of them just so happens to be one of the lowest in this entire list. Damn. Trev?
Indeed. More on that in a second, but we're not quite there yet. Yeah, so my 29, this was kind of odd where this ended up, and I think this can actually kind of flip-flop with my number 27. But my number 29 is going to be RoboCop 2014. And that was mainly because I really couldn't think of a whole lot of things to say about it. I don't necessarily think it's awful, but kind of like RoboCop 3, the whole PG-13 rating doesn't service the brand very well. But I do feel that it is somewhat successful at coming across like if RoboCop was, if RoboCop was a novel, then this would be like another adaptation of it, where the most favorite would obviously be the original film, and then this would be just like another stab at it. That's kind of how it feels. Like if it was like a short story or something like that. I don't know. I think there's an emotional element to the movie that's actually pretty strong, but it happens like only right after he becomes RoboCop. I think the scene where he realizes that pretty much all that's left of him is his brain, and I think maybe his lungs.
Yeah, his brain, his windpipe, his lungs, and his right hand.
Yeah, and I think I'll just go ahead and say I think the hand thing was kind of some kind of way to demonstrate human connectivity or something like that. I think he like can't pick up one of his weapons without it being a human hand or something like. It's been
it was the only thing that explained why the hand was kept is because there was a deleted scene where Michael Keaton's character says, "Can he save his right hand? My father always said you can determine a lot about a man through his handshake."
Oh,
what?
Okay, that's kind of dumb.
That's probably why it was deleted.
Yeah. Anyway, aside from that one moment, which is kind of pretty harrowing in my opinion, it's just kind of unremarkable. I mean, it looks good. It looks pretty slick. The cast is really good. It's a great ensemble cast of characters. Not characters, but the actors are all relatively heavy hitters. We got Michael Keaton,
and Gary Oldman.
Sam Jackson pops in there too.
Oh.
So yeah, this could probably change in terms of my ranking with another rewatch. It's been a while since I've seen it. But yeah, just whenever I was writing this out, I was thinking, I don't have a whole lot to say about it, so that's why it's so low. So yeah, my number 29 is going to be RoboCop 2014.
My number 28 is also RoboCop 2014. Oh, God. Similar to RoboCop 3, if you want a video that showcases every single thing that is wrong with RoboCop 2014, watch Stitched Together Pictures Boots to Reboots episode of RoboCop and RoboCop 2014. Everything that's wrong with the movie, he explains in great detail. RoboCop 2014 very much so feels just like a soulless attempt to rehash an old idea for modern audiences just to make money. The PG-13 rating, that's one of the biggest issues that I have with RoboCop 2014. There's moments where it wants to showcase that it's trying to be a gritty, modern-day retelling of RoboCop, like kind of like what Trev says. If it was a novel or a short story, it does kind of feel like a readaptation in modern days. The problem, though, is the PG-13 rating restrains it constantly. This is one of the absolute worst cases of a movie that's based on an R-rated property, a highly R-rated property, that people love it because of its R rating. Simply making it PG-13 just to make money rather than a good movie. And it's not just me that says that, because apparently, according to the director, for every 10 ideas that he came up with for the movie, the producers would only use one of them. None of the characters are that good, except for Gary Oldman. He tries. He really tries in the movie, but it's unfortunate he doesn't have that much to do other than just be kind of discount Commissioner Gordon from the Dark Knight trilogy. Joel Kinnaman as Alex Murphy. There's moments when he's okay. Probably his best moment is when he sees what's left of his body. Other than that, he's just kind of bland and boring. The movie is so badly paced. When it feels like it's starting to pick up speed, the Sam Jackson scenes come around and bring it to a screeching halt and repeat what we just watched. There's no blood or very little. There's no gore. There's no satire. There's not even a good villain. There's no RoboCop theme. Technically, it's technically used 3 times. Very briefly at the beginning, very briefly in the middle, and very briefly at the very end of the credits. Other than that, the music is incredibly generic. I don't remember a single piece of music from this entire movie, except for that generic rock song that's played during one of the main training sequences. Had they used the RoboCop theme, it would have helped so much, because the action scenes, what kind of little of them there are decent, but that's the problem. They're over and done with so quickly. But really the biggest issue with it is the PG-13 rating. It makes the movie feel so soulless and empty. It feels very much so just like the studio trying to take something that wasn't theirs and morph it into something that they think is better. Sorry, guys, it's not. And it's so frustrating because this movie had potential. Had lots of potential. I could have gotten behind this movie's cast if it wasn't so dull, if it wasn't so bland, if it wasn't so soulless, and if it wasn't PG-13. Because another thing about this is, yes, the special effects are very good. And I do, for the most part, prefer this RoboCop design over the original. The hand kills it. The black color scheme kills it.
But when he's silver, he looks pretty good.
When he's silver and black, he looks fantastic. But the black suit doesn't make him look like a cyborg. It just makes him look like he's wearing an Iron Man suit. And he also looks like Buzz Lightyear when he runs. But another thing, too, is I liked his motorcycle. And I like the fact that he had 2 guns that could pop out and fold out of his legs. I thought that was really cool. It was a nice way to compact his weapons. And I also like that, like the original RoboCop, he had like kill mode and arrest mode. But it was kind of symbolized by his weapons, because he had his main machine gun, which was the weapon he used to kill, supposedly. But then there was his pistol, which was also, he could be used to kill, but it was also mainly a taser pistol. So I thought that was cool. But yes, RoboCop 2014, it's just not a great movie. Every time the movie tries to get forward, it holds itself back 10 paces. It's so frustrating because this film had potential. But because the studios were so blinded and blindsided, were so blinded and misguided, again, like with RoboCop 3, they shot this movie in the foot and it just seemed doomed to fail.
Yeah, and a couple more notes on that before we move on. I do think he has some nice moments with his son, like when he first comes home. He's trying to get him to recognize him.
Oh, yeah, his family. They try to make them characters in this, but all they end up doing is just standing off to the backside and looking sad.
Kind of an afterthought.
Yeah, like, come on, guys. What the fuck?
And also, I'm going to get into this a little bit with RoboCop 3 in a second or two. This is definitely trying to, it's like the studio thought, well, RoboCop's kind of comic booky. Well, he is a comic book character. He is kind of superhero-y, so let's kind of tie him into all the superhero output that we have going on right now. Because one of my distinct memories from seeing this in the theater back in 2014 was that there was like a trailer for almost every, I think, actually not almost every big superhero release that came out that year in 2014. There was a trailer for it in front of RoboCop.
Captain America: Winter Soldier.
Yeah, and I was thinking, well, I don't necessarily think RoboCop's a superhero. I want to see like action and sci-fi movies advertised in front of this. But it was just all superhero movies, and I like superhero movies, but it just didn't feel like they should have put those in front of them. But that was apparently the studio mindset, or just the overall marketing atmosphere for that movie, and it obviously didn't pay off. So my 28. Yeah, my 28 is Tremors: A Cold Day in Hell. Oddly enough, I did like this a little bit more than Nick last time we reviewed it, and I still have some things to like about it. But yeah, they do not pull off the Arctic environment at all.
Taco Bell.
The piss humor overstays its welcome. At least with Bloodlines, it was a funny Burt moment.
Definitely an acquired taste.
Yeah. He went full Nicolas Cage. Those actually, funny enough, are like the two big things that bother me. And other than that, just trying to make it look like it's in a cold environment with that blue tint, it just makes the movie look kind of blah. And it hurts everything else. There's a lot of close-ups and whatnot, which kind of make it look like the cheapest Tremors movie.
Like an asylum movie?
Yeah, almost that bad. I would say it's maybe a little bit better, because it's hard to defend an asylum movie, except for maybe the mega sharks, but those are just so bad they're good.
Or Sharknadoes.
Oh, I hate those.
I've never seen any of those. Oddly, I'm kind of curious about them, but I can't bring myself to watch those.
Okay, let me be honest. I haven't seen them either, but they just look absolutely stupid. So
maybe that's the point.
What's really sad is that the Bitter Stampede crew has actually compared the recent Tremors movies to like Sharknado or something like that, and I wouldn't say they're that bad. Maybe A Cold Day in Hell gets that close, or gets close a little bit.
Barely.
But yeah, that's just them being bitter, unfortunately. But yeah, I think maybe what kind of maybe come around is that you kind of need this to complete the sequence of the recent 3 movies. Stuff like Bert's New Hat. They kind of foreshadow his death in Shrieker Island. Stuff like that. But overall, yeah, it is probably the weakest Tremors film, undoubtedly. And I have to try really hard to find things to like about it. I think some of the effects scenes are okay, but they're very limited. It's just not great. I remember when I first watched it, I was like, man, that kind of sucked. And I think it's just my completionism that has kind of maybe come around on it just a little bit.
To the point where he actually did buy it on disc.
Yeah, so I have them all on disc now. I don't know if I'm going to watch this one that often, but regardless, I still have them all. So yeah, that's why it's number 28. I don't hate it, but it is my least favorite of the franchise. Tremors franchise.
My number 27 is Terminator: The Sarah Connor Chronicles. I think I've said this before, but I'm just going to reiterate it. Nowadays, especially if I spend money on it, if I buy a movie, or especially a show, I try to watch the whole thing before I say whether or not it's good or bad. Unless it's part of a franchise, or if it's another season of a show that I like, but even then, I still try to give it a chance. But if it's a new show, I try to sit down and watch the whole thing before I decide whether I like it or not. Especially if it's just one season. So then if I don't like it, I can just say, I'll just keep the first season. Say, I only watched the first season. Didn't really care for it. But if there's a movie, or especially a show, that I watch and I don't finish, and I have no desire to finish, that's how you know it's not working for me. And that's the case with Terminator: The Sarah Connor Chronicles. I only made it 15 episodes in. I couldn't do it. It just wasn't working for me. A big reason for that is the cast. Summer Glau is okay as Cameron. Actually, I'd probably say she's the only reason to watch the show because she does play a female badass Terminator very, very well. The kid who plays John Connor is worse than the dude in Terminator 3. He's such a whiny, teenagey bitch. And Lena Headley or Headley, or however the hell you say her last name, just does not work as Sarah Connor. Right, honey? Meadow watched a few episodes of the show with me when I first bought it, and a few times she said she just is not Sarah Connor. She does not work as Sarah Connor. And no, I'm sorry, she does not. Stick to doing Game of Thrones and maybe the first Purge movie. Don't do Sarah Connor. It just ain't going to work for you. And again, I find it ironic that two actresses who play Sarah Connor would later go on to play two pivotal characters in Game of Thrones.
Oh, and I should also mention, to foreshadow our video tomorrow, the actor who played John Connor, he was actually in the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. I believe he was the boyfriend. Crap, I need to watch that again. But yeah, the boyfriend of the Tina equivalent in that movie.
Oh, the dude who gets impaled through the chest in the dream world.
Yes, there we go. That's what I remember him for.
Outside of the cast, the show is just boring. Boring is all living sin. This should have been like a series of TV movies because there's so much filler. They're trying to turn Terminator into a teen high school drama show. Why?
Well, I guess you could say we have Cameron's her name, right? You have some new FAP material for nerds by making a female Terminator who's not trying to kill you. So, I don't know.
He's probably right. And I'm sure that's one thing a lot of nerds do who have a giant boner for this show. Another thing, too. Jeez, is this show cheap?
I actually like the TV movie idea. They probably should have done that with like the main storylines and just made them TV movies. But anyway, continue.
The thing is, though, the main storyline can be summed up in 2 episodes worth, especially in season 1. It's 9 episodes long, and I'd say there's equal amount of 2, at the very most, 3 episodes worth of story. Everything else is boring drivel. But back to my previous point. Jeez, is this show cheap? All of the CGI Terminator models they have look like something out of the Terminators, the Asylum movie. And I just don't think Terminator, you'd have to really try something different to make it work, or just make it an HBO Max original. But I don't think Terminator makes for a good TV idea. RoboCop, I think, would make for a good TV show because you can make that a futuristic, kind of like Hannibal, with being kind of a gorier, or Lethal Weapon, a gorier action police procedural story that is also a RoboCop show. But Terminator, I don't think makes for a good TV show unless you really, really put a different spin on it, like make it take place in the future. Yeah, Terminator Sarah Connor Chronicles, I just don't dig it. It's not that good of a show. None of its casting is very interesting. There's scant few moments when it is entertaining. But other than that, it's just boring drivel.
This is another thing for you people who recognize Dean Winters for the Mayhem guy from the Allstate commercial. He plays Sarah's boyfriend in this show. He's also in Hellraiser 6. So if y'all want to see what Mayhem was doing before...
That's what he looks like. Or that's
Yeah.
who he was.
Yeah, if y'all want to see what he was doing before he became probably the most famous commercial gig guy in recent memory, you can check out some of his early sci-fi and horror offerings. But anyway, so my 27? Were you done? Okay. My 27, and it's funny how we kind of have all kind of the same bottom five. My 27 is going to be RoboCop 3. I think this is kind of interchangeable with the remake in terms of it's like my mood, like whenever, how I enjoy it. But I do remember seeing this and thinking there's some things that I like. But again, they don't really reach their full potential because of the rating. What it seemed like they were trying to do with this one is they were trying to cash in on Batman, which was pretty much what anything comic book related in the late 80s, early 90s was trying to do. But they missed, they were like 3 or 4 years too late. And like Nick said, there were other things that you would think would be comparable to the RoboCop franchise that were coming out at the same time. And had it like reached its original release date, it would have been, I mean, it bombed anyway, but it would have bombed even worse. But yeah, there's some things here and there that I like. I like the scene where he commandeers the pimp's vehicle. That's pretty funny.
His first intro, too, when he blasts his way through his car door or his car roof, it's cool, but it's over in a blink and you'll miss it moment.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's the thing, too. With RoboCop 3, every time you think it's starting to turn entertaining, it puts the brakes on that and just turns back to being dull.
This actually did have a TV spinoff. It's really hard to find now, a live-action show and a cartoon.
There was 2 animated shows and a live-action TV series that is not connected to the series, unfortunately, except for the first movie. But yes, it's incredibly difficult to find, as are the 2 animated shows, which is why I didn't include those in this list. All there is the original trilogy and the remake. I actually would not mind checking out the live-action TV show because that looks close to what I envision a RoboCop series could be like. But that one is also held back by the fact that it's very tame.
There's also the miniseries Prime Directives, which some consider, I guess, kind of an unofficial RoboCop 4. That's a little bit easier to find. They actually released the whole miniseries on, I think...
individual discs?
Yeah, individual discs, like 4 or 5 of them. I was looking at my shelf.
Never seen those either. I'd like to, because those look better than 3, maybe?
It was okay. It was actually R-rated. It was okay, but it's definitely held back by its TV budget. And the guy who plays RoboCop, he's really short. So
yeah, that's what a lot of people talk shit about. Is RoboCop is obviously a lot shorter than the original one.
But yeah, not much to say about RoboCop 3. Honestly, I haven't watched any of the RoboCops in a good while, but I do remember the ones that I really liked. And this one was just okay. It had its moments. I don't like the Robo Ninja. I think he was a ninja, right?
Ninja / samurai.
He's not a very good antagonist. Or he wasn't executed as well as he could have been because he's basically Japanese Terminator. So it's like they kind of wanted to do Terminator versus RoboCop a little bit, but they couldn't do it directly. Sadly, this is the movie that killed Fred Decker's career. I mean, this was his 3rd movie, I do believe. And then after this, he would just go on to write stuff. Fairly recently, he wrote The Predator. And unfortunately, I think he was the contributing factor to the things that don't work in that movie. He seems to want to try and have this whimsical mix of childlike wonder with these kind of hardcore horror or sci-fi. What?
Kind of like Diet Steven Spielberg.
Yeah, and he sounds like a real nice guy, a real major movie nerd, because his commentary for Night of the Creeps is a real good listen. But unfortunately, that movie, his debut movie, was his only good one, because after this, I don't know what happened. He just lost his mojo, I guess you'd say.
Well, I think he's a bit like Gareth Edwards. He was just handed the wrong stuff. And I do actually admit, I sort of respect the fact that since then, Fred Dekker has just been like, oh, yeah, that was my bad. I fucked up making that movie.
Oh, yeah, he's definitely said it about this one.
And also, he's not entirely at fault, because a lot of the decisions that was made on this movie as well was also the misguided Orion stuff. They were so desperately trying to save themselves, and unfortunately, this movie suffered because of it.
And they also shot themselves in the foot. It always pans out this way all the time. Whenever they're trying to overcompensate for something, they always shoot themselves in the foot. So
can't wait to see Disney do that to themselves, because I'll just laugh and laugh and laugh.
It's probably more likely than some people think, but time will tell. But yeah, RoboCop 3. Honestly, I should probably give all these a watch now that we're talking about them. This is the first time I've talked about them with you. But yeah, there's parts of it that I do like more than the remake, so that's why it's higher up a little bit. But yeah, this is definitely a brand and a character that didn't need to be PG-13, because I think the Terminator movies that are PG-13 actually have some great things about them, substance-wise and action-wise, that are still really great and far better than anything in these two RoboCop movies.
Well, yeah, at least they're entertaining.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, RoboCop suffered from the lack of not even the lack of that. I should say it, from the restraints that was put on the character and what you could do with it compared to the first two movies. So yeah, RoboCop 3, my number 27.
My number 26 is Alien Covenant. Again, not going to repeat myself too much. Ow, that hurt. Yeah, the first act is just like Prometheus 1.5. It's just as frustrating and dull and annoying and frustrating. The second half is more entertaining, but only because it's ripping off scenes from Aliens, and specifically Alien, because it's trying so desperately to tie itself to the series, and also a bitter, pissed off Ridley Scott just saying, fuck you to the fans, here's what you want at the barest minimum.
Yeah. More on that in a little bit.
That's all I'll say. It's barely watchable. Skip the first half, watch the second half. You'll get something out of it. At least it's gory. Yeah. But other than that, Alien Covenant is just not a satisfying film.
As it stands right now, and again, I'm going to get into this in a little bit, I have a viewing preference, or not a viewing preference, but a perspective on that movie that I think works for where the franchise is right now. But yeah, more on that in a second. But actually, I think the next 5 or 6 movies on my list are probably going to surprise Nick, and we're probably going to diverge here for a little bit. But my number 26 is going to be Terminator 3: Rise of the Machines. Now, I actually have a lot of nostalgia for this movie, and actually really do like, particularly the chase scene. The first chase scene in the movie is pretty dang crazy and kind of epic in terms of action movie stuff. I also like the final moment with John. It's a very great call to destiny moment, which kind of shows him that despite all his best efforts, he's not going to escape this. But yeah, Terminator 3, just now that we have 6 movies, this one does kind of feel separated from the rest because after this, the movies would either really work on homage to the first Terminator, or then, like recently with Dark Fate, they would try and carry on what T2, what people liked about T2. But Rise of the Machines just kind of has this rinse and repeat element, and it really feels. You can tell it lacks that Cameron touch. At least to me. It just feels like a Hollywood boardroom of producers and whatnot. Okay, this is what we need to do because Terminator 2 was so successful. So we basically need to do this, this, and that again with slight variation. It's kind of also trying to ride the wave of the Matrix, particularly with the way that like the outfits for the T-800 or Macho Man, as I like to call him in this movie. And the TX, they had those sleek leather outfits that kind of fit the whole Matrix.
Crunch.
So yeah, even though this is low on my list, there are things to really enjoy about this movie. It is a fun time.
At least it's R-rated.
At least it's R-rated. It was the last one for a little while until Dark Fate.
Well,
but yeah, just with.
Yeah, technically there was the unrated version of Salvation, but the differences between that are a piss and a squirt.
Yeah, pretty much. That's like a hardcore PG-13 because there's really nothing added to Salvation that makes that an R-rated cut. But anyway,
except for a tit shot. But more on that later.
Yeah, more on that later. But no, T3, it's a fun time. And it does have some good gore bits. Probably the most memorable violent gore moment in this movie is when the TX, disguised as Kate's fiance, Scott, I do believe, just rams right through that cop's chest. It's still pretty, it was shocking at the time. And it's just still pretty like, wow, that was messed up. But the humor of the movie, go ahead.
Took the first kill from the first Terminator movie to a whole nother level.
Oh yeah, because that was more or less implied with like an after shot to show the bloody fist. But this was like hardcore right there. But yeah, this movie is pretty funny. There are some great one-liners from Arnie.
We need a new vehicle.
Master of staying the obvious. But I think it's also the campiest. It's also the campiest Terminator movie, I think. And that's what kind of.
Well, there's also Genesis. That one's also pretty damn campy.
Yeah. But yeah, not a whole lot to say about it. I've actually been I've been trying to rewatch it here recently, but then I just end up watching something else. But I do have a lot of nostalgia for the movie because this was actually the movie that got me into watching the other Terminators, which at the time, for a good while, it was the first three. And actually, in hindsight, I didn't have to wait that long because Salvation didn't come too long after this.
Nope.
No, yeah. But yeah, that is what got me into Terminator, or like kind of like how AVP motivated me to actually just sit down and watch them all the way through, like in one sitting. But yeah, I guess it's safe to say it's my least favorite. I prefer, there's things about the other five that I like much more. But at the end of the day, if it was on, I would still watch it. But anyway, it's still my number 26. I think it's probably going to be higher for you.
Yes. All right. Number 25 is Predators. Yeah, this is the one that I just dig. The one Predator movie I dig the least. The first two acts are fairly decent, but it's the third act that really kills the film for me. And also the characters aren't very likable. It feels very much like a big budget fan film. And it doesn't really add anything new to the Predator mythos other than the Bad Bloods idea and the giant planet that's a game preserve. Whoop-de-doo. Moving on.
Yeah, so my 25, and this is probably going to be shocking to Nick, is Tremors 4, The Legend Begins. And again, like any of the first 4 Tremors movies, the Stampede era, as we like to call it in the fan base, I have a lot of nostalgia, a lot of memories, and anticipation waiting for this to come out. Because, my first 2 Tremors were the first 2. And I was actually getting into the franchise right around when 3 came out. So there was that good stretch with 3, the series, and then 4, where you just kind of had relatively frequent content as a Tremors fan. I, of course, just ate it up. But in the years since, for some people, this is a strength, and for others, it's a weakness. Some people actually consider this their least favorite Tremors movie, if you navigate the fan base a little bit. But it's either a strength or a weakness, and I think the Western element just kind of sticks out. It's not necessarily bad. As Nick has quoted me saying in our reviews, and I've been saying this a lot in recent years, it feels like a Hallmark Western movie invaded by graboids. It actually has some really good dramatic content, but it also probably is the slowest Tremors movie.
Yes,
I would, which is funny because none of these movies are super long, but the pacing on this one, unfortunately, it's the one where you notice it the most. It has great effects. The cast is great.
You want to bed down with a real pretty woman. Suppose you just hire somebody to do that too.
Yes. Black Hand Kelly, Billy Drago, may he rest in peace, is hands down the best part of the movie for sure, aside from the effects. And Michael Gross does a good job as Hiram too. Michael Gross is always reliable in these movies.
Except overall. Part 6.
Yeah, and even then, he's still, there's still things he does. I'm like, yeah, that feels like Bert. But yeah, I think in hindsight, it's really just like a recent years thing. I feel like this might have been better served as like an episode of the show. And really the best part of the movie is whenever we basically have the Tremors version of Jaws with Black Hand Kelly, Juan, and Hiram out there in the countryside trying to find the graboids, which at that point in time they don't realize have grown up. That's, for me, the best part of the movie. And I think if that had been an episode of the show, it would have definitely been one of the best episodes for sure. So yeah, I mean, I'll still put it on. I'm a hardcore Tremors fan. And it is obviously better at what it sets out to do than Cold Day in Hell. But it's probably my second least favorite overall. So yeah, Tremors 4, The Legend Begins.
Coming in at number 24 for me is Alien Resurrection. It's got great effects. It's got good action scenes. Some of the jokes are funny. And despite the fact that she definitely is phoning it in, Sigourney Weaver still does an adequate job as Ripley. Other than that, Resurrection is just the most forgettable of the whole series. I kind of have to really force myself to rewatch the movie whenever I'm going on an Alien marathon, because in hindsight, I do realize, yeah, Alien 3 just kind of puts a nice cap on the series, but then I was like, oh, wait, no, there's a fourth one.
Oh, yeah, that fourth
I guess I'll watch that for whatever reason. Aside from Alien Covenant, too, it probably does have the most frustrating cliffhanger ending. I'm sure that maybe Fox had some plans to follow this up with another movie, but then Alien vs. Predator came around, and then Ridley Scott wanted to butt-fuck the franchise, and they were like, okay. So then it just kind of seems like this is the one that, hey, what about me? Where's my ending?
Exactly.
Yeah, just not much to say about Resurrection. It definitely is the most bland of the whole series, and it's not a bad film by any means. It's just not great.
Quirky. It's quite quirky. So if you're a quirky person, you'll probably be drawn to it.
Yes.
But also, and I think I mentioned this in our review, if you do want to seek out some sort of continuation, Dark Horse Comics, Aliens versus Predator versus Terminator, that little miniseries they did, that actually does pick up where Alien Resurrection ends. So if anybody happens to be a Resurrection fan and you don't know about that storyline...
Oh, shit. He froze. Shit. I think his phone died again. Hold on 1 second, guys. I need to get editing software. This just totally brings the video to a screeching halt. Yeah, I think his phone died. Shit. Hang on 1 sec, guys. So, just to keep the pace going, hopefully, I'm going to move on to my number 23. And I'm going to say that from here on out on this list, these are all movies that I do enjoy and I do see myself returning to. These first 4 installments are the ones I see myself the least returning back to. But still, these are all movies I like and enjoy, and I see myself coming back to. So my number 23 is Tremors Shrieker Island. Here we go. YOLO.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right, so as expected, whenever my phone reaches like around 50%, it just reboots for some reason. So do you remember what I was saying?
RoboCop versus Alien versus Terminator.
Yeah, no, Aliens versus Predator versus Terminator. If Resurrection, that's probably your safest bet.
There it goes.
Yeah. But anyways, I think it was...
Hang on, Trev. Let your phone readjust itself. Your audio's a little glitchy there. So, hold up. Like I said, from here on out, these are all movies that I do enjoy, and these are ones I see myself coming back to. Starting off with number 23 is Tremors Shrieker Island. Not quite as harsh as I was on this movie the last time that I saw it, because I still do say, yeah, it's better than Part 6. There are decisions here that I don't like killing off Bert. Fuck you. But this one just felt like everybody was having fun again. Part 6, I don't know if there was some studio interference or there was just like some kind of quota that Don Michael Paul was forced to make. But this felt like everybody was having fun making the series again. And that enthusiasm kind of bleeds through into the viewer. Not as much as 5, but this one felt like they had much more of their cylinders firing off. All the movie references are fun and funny. The humor is once again pretty on point. I'm older. I'm wiser. I'm younger. You got me there. The action scenes are entertaining enough, and at least it does have a decent villain in Richard Brake. It still has its problems. Again, killing off Bert is bullshit. It's very tame. There's barely any blood. A lot of the kills are pretty lame. The underutilization of the Shriekers is disappointing. But this one, It's just a kind of a fun time. It's harmless, relatively. Yeah. Now you're number
Hey,
23, I believe.
yeah, do I sound okay?
Yeah, you sound fine. Go ahead.
Okay, good. That means everything rebooted up. So my number 24, because I didn't get to do that one.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, so try not to fall over dead. I'm not going to be very lengthy, but my 24 is going to be Prometheus. And even though Ridley is clearly by this point was pretty disinterested in Alien and the Xenomorph, he still is he's a more accomplished filmmaker than I think the director of Resurrection, or at least as far as I know. So even whenever he doesn't really give a shit, he still does okay. And really, to answer a point you brought up earlier, Ridley was the one who wanted to revisit the space jockey idea. It just, unfortunately, by the time he got around to it, he was starting to think about stuff that apparently relates to androids and whatnot. So over the course of this movie and then Covenant, and then finally getting to Raised by Wolves, it seemed like he realized what he really wanted to do in the sci-fi genre. But that being said, this movie does have its problems, undoubtedly. But it looks good. I'm just kind of intrigued by what he's getting at. I just wish it more obviously connected into Alien, because it obviously just is its own side story. But to wrap up my thoughts on this, the main thing I think of when I think of Prometheus is that it's kind of the Chronicles of Riddick to Pitch Black's everything else alien related. It feels like it occurs in that universe or takes place in that universe, but it doesn't deal with, the thing that I guess brought you to that universe. Like with Pitch Black, it was a creature feature. Alien obviously is a creature feature too, as is most of its sequels. But Prometheus decided, hey, let's kind of do not necessarily a space opera like Chronicles of Riddick, but something else that exists in that universe. That's probably the best way I can put it without writing out some giant essay. So yeah, I do enjoy it more than Nick, but it still is one of the lesser entries for sure. So you're 22.
No, you can do your 23, just so that we're even.
My 23, following on from that, is Covenant. And this is better because we have some xenomorph action. I really am quite fascinated by the idea of an android creating the xenomorph, or at least the xenomorphs in these movies. Because what I really wish they had done is that they had left in that bit from the novelization where David says the engineers had done this before. This is a fossilized xenomorph egg, and I'm recreating it. I wish they had left that in because it would tie into the series better. But yeah, I think there's potential. Unfortunately, we may not see it with a concluding chapter, but I really like the idea of the prequels being about the creator, and then the original 3 movies are about the destroyer of the xenomorph. I think there's a nice kind of rhyme to that whole thing. But again, we don't have somebody who wants to see that vision through. So really,
frustratingly so.
Yeah, the way I look at Covenant right now, and this will actually lead into my 22 here in a second. The way I look at Covenant, the way it works, is as a flawed remake of the original Alien.
Very flawed.
Because it's so similar to that original movie, the SOS, the way the xenomorph is used. You could say that David is an update on Ash, and in this case, they've made them connected even more so. So it actually works better as a remake than a prequel in its current form. So yeah, I look at Covenant as a remake as it stands at this point in time. So yeah, you're 22.
Terminator Salvation. Still is my least favorite Terminator movie, but that's not really a bad thing. It's just the one that I revisit the least. It's very obvious that Christian Bale was solely cast as John Connor because Warner Brothers wanted more Christian Bale action because The Dark Knight, for some fucking reason, was a hit. Is he the best? No. Is he the worst? Also no, because there's Sarah Connor Chronicles. But it's just an odd choice. Sometimes I can kind of see it, and other times, nah, I just don't really buy it. It just kind of seems like he's playing a more pissed off, non-bat suit wearing Bruce Wayne. Sam Worthington is awesome as Marcus. The film has excellent direction and cinematography and action scenes. Mick G is certainly an action movie guy. The special effects are fantastic. This was the last Stan Winston Terminator movie, right?
Yeah, and it was actually dedicated to him.
And it does have that Stan Winston stamp of quality, which is great. It uses its $200 million budget very, very, very well. But this is also held back by the fact that it's PG-13. Not quite as much as others, and especially now that there's the quote-unquote unrated cut. There is at least some blood in this movie, but it just still feels like the one that... Genesis is the most sanitized, but there at least you can tell that the filmmakers were going for a PG-13 rating, but they had fun with it. Here it does feel like Mick G wanted to make an R-rated movie, but then Warner Brothers got cold feet, especially since Christian Bale was involved, and said, make it PG-13. So it's a little frustrating there. It's not nearly as bad as like RoboCop 3 or RoboCop 2014. It verges on it at times, but Salvation, it's a fun movie. It's just the one Terminator movie that I see myself returning to the least. And I think over the years, it definitely is the one that I've returned to the least. Because I've even watched Dark Fate more than this one.
Yeah, I can see that. So my number 22? Yeah, so my number 22 is going to be Predators. And the main thought, pretty much said all my thoughts in our review. It's kind of funny that this ended up above Covenant, because as a Predator fan, I'm probably more inclined to like a Predator movie than an Alien. But really, this just mainly feels like a remake of the original Predator. And just like how I think that Covenant feels like a remake of Alien, or works better that way. Slightly. Predators mostly works as a Predator reboot because it doesn't add a whole lot of new things to the mythology. I don't know, it's just the attitude of dismissing Predator 2 and even the AVPs. It's unnecessary. I mean, okay, you don't have to like them, but at least Shane Black with the Predator, as hated as that movie currently is and flawed as it is, he still made an effort to acknowledge continuity. So I think, again, as time has gone on, and also in because of the fact that the Predator exists, this has become probably my least favorite of the solo Predator movies. But there's still things I enjoy about it. But again, it really just works as a remake. Yeah, so that's Predators for me.
My number 21 is Alien versus Predator Requiem. Not going to repeat myself too much. It has kind of gone up a little bit now that I've thought about it more. Its blatant flaws are still very much so present. It's got boring-ass characters. It's like Godzilla 2014. It's too damn dark. It's got boring-ass characters. It's got haphazard pacing. Wolf is badass. It's got good gore, except for the pregnancy shit. Like, fuck. Really could have done without that. Huh?
Feels kind of trashy.
Yeah.
Exploitation movie stuff.
It's got great fight scenes. It's got good effects. Even though this one does feel also like a big budget fan film, not as much as Predators though. The Pred Alien's badass. It's a fun movie. If you just look at it as a modern day 80s monster movie, it works. Moving
Yeah,
on.
Well, I'm going to be talking about that here in a sec, but Nick's not going to like this. But again, this is pretty high up. But my 21 is going to be the first AVP. And I think the main thing is that I think this works as a good PG-13 alien movie. Probably the best way that could turn out. But I don't know. It's not awful. Honestly, nothing that's done with a Predator, in my opinion, has been awful, like truly terrible. But I don't know. It just feels lacking, the Predator element, and I am a Predator fan when it comes to these two creatures. And technically, the narrative should serve the Predators because, I mean, like, they're the ones who lure the human characters down there. The hunt of their manhood ritual is the main plot device. But again, I just think Anderson obviously favors the xenomorphs, and that element of the movie is stronger. And yeah, not much else to say. I do enjoy the movie. But yeah, it's going to be my 21.
My number 20 is Tremors 4. Similar to what Trev says, this is probably of the Stampede era my least favorite installment, but that's not a bad thing. Yes, it is the slowest Tremors movie. This is the one where you're just like, this is getting a little dull. The most. It's got fantastic effects. Yeah, the Tremors Jaws scenes are pretty spectacular. Blackhand Kelly is phenomenal to watch. It's just a shame he dies. Why do you have to die, man? Why? So yeah, Tremors 4 is a fun movie, but similar to Alien Resurrection, this one feels kind of distant from the first 3 Tremors movies. Well, at least here. It's like 200 years in the future with Resurrection and 100 years in the past. Like, what the fuck? But this one feels distant from the first 3 Tremors movies. Not as bad as Resurrection, because at least with Alien 3, you can see that as the end of the series. Tremors 3 very much so has more to tell with the show. But still, I think it's kind of similar. But 4, it's not bad. It's just the most middle of the road Tremors movie. Moving on.
And my number 20 is going to be Requiem. The main reason is Wolf. I also think that this delivers upon its R rating, but then also overdoes it a little bit, again, with the pregnant women and whatnot. The Pred Alien is cool. I just think it was a very bold decision to say, hey, let's do an Alien versus Predator movie, but it's basically going to be the Blob remake. You know, it goes completely against what you expect, which I kind of like because, to be honest, sometimes whenever you deliver upon expectations, it's enjoyable, but then other times it's just so on the nose, and so what you expect is kind of boring. I think that is the potential if they had just done exactly what the comics did. Because I think both AVP movies have their own identity within the AVP sub-franchise because, you know, they don't go out into space and it's not just Colonial Marines versus Xenomorphs and Yautja. So, yeah, I think doing I guess you'd say, B-80s monster movie is just kind of a bold concept to pitch to a studio and them actually be behind it, funny enough.
And it's oddly fitting.
Yeah, it's just, it's fitting, but at the same time, it puts a lot of people off. But that's also what I find so compelling about it. And yeah, the main reason is Wolf. He's probably is my favorite Predator that's in the entire franchise. So he elevates this slightly above AVP, but I mean, they're a great double feature. Kind of like the first two Predators. What one doesn't do, the other does and vice versa. So, yeah, it's going to be my number 20.
My number 19, kicking off the trilogy of threes, is Alien 3. I still do appreciate this movie more than I used to, even more so now that I've gotten into it more. Hey, did you see that Alien 3 motion comic I sent you?
I did.
Okay, so
I dug it.
yeah, I dug it too. Yes, there's controversial decisions made, killing off Newt, killing off Ripley, having this be so bleak and depressing. But it is still oddly a fitting ending to the series. If you want to stop right here, it definitely works as a conclusion. It tries to make the series scary again, which I also failed to mention. There's still action elements to it, but it still has the very much so like a horror shell around it. I just kind of feel like it has echoes of the action element from, oh no, Decker Shadow, I am not watching your Tremors reviews. Sorry, man. Yeah, Alien 3 is a decent movie. It's not great. It's kind of like what James Rolfe says. It's Alien 3 is not a terrible movie. It's just adequate. It's fun. It's entertaining. It's got great gore. It's got a great body count. But it's very much so a mood piece. You have to be in a certain mood to watch Alien 3. When you are in that certain mood, it can work very well for you. But if you're someone like me who leans more towards aliens, but you still appreciate the stranger elements of the franchise, Alien 3 just sometimes is just kind of there for you. But like I said, in the right state of mind, Alien 3 can be a fun flick.
I agree. And if you want, after you're done watching the first 3 movies, just go and watch the Alien versus Predators and you'll be okay.
Yep.
So my number 19, and I feel this is probably going to be a little bit unfair to this movie, but again, it's been such a long time since I've seen it, and I was thinking that one of the sequels I prefer over it. And my number 19 is going to be RoboCop, believe it or not. There are 18 movies above this that I like more. And I think I realized that I clearly prefer Terminator to RoboCop.
Well, I mean, I do too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I kind of view Terminator and RoboCop. Terminator's Godzilla. RoboCop is Gamera.
Or Kong.
No, not even that.
Well, not necessarily in terms of their position, because, Kong inspired Godzilla, but in terms of, people's preferences, I mean, I guess you would probably, more people talk about Alien than they do Predator, more people talk about Terminator than they do RoboCop, that kind of deal. Kong and Godzilla are probably almost neck and neck, but one is a bit more noteworthy because he has a longer franchise. I don't know. That's a discussion within itself, but yeah, RoboCop, again, I feel like this is a bit unfair, but I just was thinking about the other 18 movies that are left on this list, and I just was like, well, I guess this is where I got to put this one. It's not a bad movie, not in the least. This is probably one of Paul Verhoeven's best movies, if not probably his masterpiece. Possibly, I mean, it's kind of a hard call because there's Total Recall, there's Starship Troopers. Those are also good, but I don't know. I think this is what really put him on the map.
It is, yes, but I kind of have to give it more to Total Recall. Partially because it's more polished than RoboCop, but also it has Arnold.
Indeed.
But RoboCop is so close. And then there's Starship Troopers, too, which is so fucking violent. Damn.
Well, that's like one of his trademarks, is to be super violent.
Oh, and I can just only imagine if Orion was to try to get Paul Verhoeven back and have the same stipulations for RoboCop 3, he would just have a massive shit fit.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I feel bad having this so low. I need to revisit this movie for sure. But it has a great political, or not political, it has a great advertising satire. It has great gore, great effects. Peter Weller is great in the movie. This is probably his most iconic role. I mean, it is because somebody says Peter Weller, oh, that's RoboCop.
Yeah.
I also like the go motion. I'm a big stop motion fanatic, so I like the fact that the next level of that technique was featured very well here with Ed 209. He's a great movie robot for one thing. Yeah, this is a good movie, but again, the thing I can say at this point in time is that there's 18 other movies that I liked better than it. So yeah, that's why it's here at number 19.
All right then. Sure, Shawnee
See?
Boy's gonna be shitting himself whenever he watches this.
Don't kill me, son. I need to watch it again.
My number 18 is Tremors 3.
Hey, okay, Nick. I'm gonna use the restroom. You continue.
What surprised me about this most recent viewing is how much nostalgia I have for this movie, because I just found myself really digging this movie for our review. It has its flaws. It looks very cheap. The shriekers are non-existent, frustratingly so. The ass blasters aren't nearly as threatening as the shriekers, or especially the graboids. A lot of the characters are really annoying. The only real outstanding performance and character here is Bert, but there's a lot of good things about this movie that I think a lot of people overlook. The practical effects when they're on screen are very solid. There is some decent monster action. There's some good monster kills, good monster gore. It definitely does feel like the first film a lot more than 2, which is both good and bad. It's nice if you're nostalgic for the first movie, so then when you watch 3, you're just like, ah, I'm back, which is awesome. It does lead very well into the TV series, which I still say, if this was like a pilot TV movie for the series, it would have been spectacular. But as a direct-to-video movie, this really does come off as being a TV movie on the direct-to-DVD market. But still, Tremors 3, it's a fun time. Yeah, it's just got its flaws, but if you look past that and you're a Tremors fan, you'll dig it.
Oh yeah, that's going to be definitely a bit higher up on my list. So more on that eventually. My number 18 is going to be RoboCop 2. I actually do think that I prefer this one a little bit more than the original, obviously, because it's a step above it. I don't know, man. I just love the RoboCop versus RoboCane stuff. Again, because it's some great animation. It's very kinetic. It's just a great way to end the movie. I will say there's some odd comparisons you can make with The Dark Knight, at least in scene similarities. Whenever RoboCop is having his game of chicken with Kane before he gets killed, Kane's in a truck, and it's very similar to Batman, riding the Batpod towards Joker in the truck. That's something that really stuck out to me whenever I was watching. Well, the last time I watched RoboCop 2 is that this feels a little bit like The Dark Knight. I mean, it's not like beat for beat, but it is kind of similar. So I thought that was kind of odd.
And how fucked up that the 2 motorcyclists that do wheelies over RoboCop's crotch get spared, but the one guy that actually swerves to get out of his way, RoboCop decides, mine, thunk. Like, really, dude? Whatever. I just thought that was kind of funny. But more on RoboCop 2 a little later.
Yeah. Some people are put off by the fact that RoboCop starts the malfunction in this movie a little bit. They probably thought that was silly. At least there's some complaints that I've heard to that
That's
effect.
probably the worst scene in the whole movie, in my opinion. Because, I mean, I didn't mind it as a kid, but now I watch them, it's like, this brings the entire story to a screeching halt.
Yeah. There's also the little kid gangster, which is very odd. I've always
And the
thought,
shitty music score.
yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. There's something kind of charming about the score for this one. It's not as great as the first movies, which, who did the score, by the way, or the theme for RoboCop?
I don't know. I don't remember his name, but I think his music is garbage. He in no way lives up to Basil Palladorus.
Okay, that's who I'm asking about, is who did the original theme. There we go.
Oh, Basil
Yeah.
Palladorus. Okay.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, I can kind of see where you're coming from. But yeah, I think this movie, surprisingly, because this is from the director of The Empire Strikes Back,
Shockingly.
Irvin Kershner. Yeah, he actually does a pretty good job matching the level of violence and, I guess, pulpy 80s sci-fi feel. Or this wasn't 80s anymore, but I mean, it's 1990, so it still has that feel because the 90s had yet to define themselves. I don't know. I just, again, I haven't seen these RoboCop movies in a good while. But I just remember having a lot of fun with the second one, and I feel that it is definitely underrated. It kind of has a similar dynamic, and I think we've discussed this off camera. It has a similar dynamic with the first two Predator movies. RoboCop and Predator are, excuse me, are quite beloved. But for some reason, Predator 2 and RoboCop 2, which came out in 1990, just like the first ones came out in 87, they're just shit on for some reason. I mean, they have a following now. It's been long enough, 31 years, but still, yeah, it's an underrated sequel in my opinion. So, but again, there's 17 movies that I like more than it, so that's why it's number 18.
My number 17 is Terminator 3. Okay, let's just get this out of the way. The guy who plays John Connor is a whiny little bitch. It kind of has a bleak downer ending now that I look back upon it, which never hit me as a kid, but now I watch it as an adult, I realize, oh.
That sucks.
That sucks dick. And
that's weird because that.
Go ahead.
Sorry, that's one of my favorite moments for some reason. There's something about it's emotional in a way, and I don't know what it is about me that resonates with that. It's kind of a similar element with Alien 3 because it's just really downbeat and dire, but somehow that still speaks to me. I don't know. It's weird. It's hard to put into words, but continue.
And yes, Terminator 3's biggest sin is that it's so obviously trying to copy Terminator 2. Any criticism that you can garner or any kind of... If people shit on Terminator 3 for the fact that it is so obviously copying T2, I will always agree with, because yes, that is the film's biggest issue. And yes, I do also agree it does very much so lack the Cameron vibe, which even is like something like Salvation kind of emulates James Cameron's vibe. That's because it's a dark cyberpunk futuristic movie. But that's kind of an easy thing to portray. But, and especially with the influence of T2 on this movie's sleeve, the fact that it's missing James Cameron's touch, or at least the James Cameron feel, does kind of make this one stick out a bit. But outside of that, T3 is a kick-ass movie. It's got fantastic action scenes and amazing special effects, decent gore. This was the last R-rated movie in the Terminator series for a long time. Arnold steals the show. We need a new vehicle. Your confusion is not rational. She's a healthy female of breeding age. I think there's a little bit more to it than that. My database does not accompany the dynamics of human pair bonding. She'll be back.
Talk to the hand.
Talk to the hand. Talk to the hand. Now. T3 is a kick-ass movie. If you want to criticize it for being derivative of T2, it is. So there's no argument about it. But outside of that, and also, I'm going to retract my statement. I now think the TX is the most powerful antagonistic cyborg we've gotten in the entire Terminator franchise. Because if this chick had the Rev 9's ability of being able to split into two different entities, this bitch would be damn near unstoppable.
Yeah.
This chick's a badass. T3 is a fun movie. I don't give a shit what anyone says about it.
Oh, no, it's fun. It's just my least favorite.
Moving on.
So my number 17 is going to be Terminator Dark Fate. And I think this movie is actually, in some elements of it, severely underrated. But there's also some major things that bring it down. Probably the way that you feel about Alien 3 in terms of the flaws is how I feel about Dark Fate. But regardless, this is actually probably, overall, the most, if you wanted to do like a trilogy for Terminator, this is probably the most satisfying third part, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
It definitely has a lot of, you can make a lot of comparisons with Alien 3. Just like Alien 3 kills off Newt, this movie kills off John. Like within the opening, I don't know how many minutes it is. It's not very long. The opening 4 minutes. The effects for that scene are great. The de-aging or the digital faces on stunt doubles is actually pretty well done.
They're crow jobs.
Yeah, pretty much. It's not even Arnold who's the Terminator in that scene either. But I don't know, just the way this movie opens, like with Sarah's narration and everything, it's kind of doing the same thing that Rise of the Machines did, but better in the fact that for some people it might take itself too seriously, but I feel like that's okay following T2. I don't know. It just feels a lot more in the vein of something that would follow the first two movies.
Mm-hmm.
The problem
feels more like the logical continuation.
Yeah, exactly. It just feels right, even though there's two of the subsequent sequels after T2 that I enjoy more, just in terms of like their entertainment value and how they relate to my favorite film in that series. This is still definitely a contender for one of the most underrated movies of all time, I would say. But then again, it's that whole fresh. Unfortunately, it became a sacrificial victim of the culture war and rage porn. For all this, yeah. As Nick Thomson has said, go off in your angry masturbation corner. That's what people do with this movie, unfortunately. Grace is. I like the idea. I like the idea of her being like a female Kyle Reese meets Marcus Wright, but she's undeniably, as Nick said in our review, a man hater.
And looks like a man.
Yeah, so she's very, very androgynous. Her demeanor is just very off-putting, which is unfortunate because she's such a pivotal part of the movie. Danny is not convincing as the new John Connor. I think the actress tries, but probably her worst scene is they should have used an older actor for the flash forward because she's not convincing at all.
Should have made it a different character entirely.
Well, I mean, the character is okay. I like what you said in our review. I think actually Meadow said something to this effect, is that they could have connected Danny to Sarah's contacts on the border. been part of that family, Enrique's family?
No, she said that she would have liked John to become a Terminator in the future so that he could come back and be the new Protector. I was the one who said that if they had made Danny one of Enrique's kids, or at least
that's what,
or at least in a member of Enrique's family, that would have been a better connection to T2 rather than just a totally brand new buttfuck character that comes out of nowhere and tries to replace the entire franchise and fails.
Yeah, I mean, I like how early on her story mirrors Sarah whenever she was a waitress and whatnot, just living an '80s girl's life, and Danny is kind of doing the same, but now. I like that, but again, sadly, those two elements are major cons. Sarah, though, Linda Hamilton coming back, that's another great motivating factor for this being the true spiritual sequel to the first two movies and continuing her story. She's great. She kind of has a Harrison Ford Force Awakens thing going on, but that's okay.
Is there peanut butter in this?
Yeah, just almost actually pretty much every moment she's in there is great. She actually has a very good emotional moment when she's talking with Danny about not being able to remember John.
Yes, that was a little bit of a tearjerker because you're just like, oh man, this poor woman.
Yeah, exactly.
And it also kind of hits me a little bit too because I'm about to become a parent, so I can only imagine what that's got to be like for you. Like, I can't even remember my own son's face.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's a tearjerker. It's kind of a similar thing going on with Ripley in Alien 3. It's almost a bit of survivor's guilt.
Yet another element or a comparison between this and Alien 3.
Exactly. And yeah, it seems like we could go on because Dark Fate is a good movie. Again, really underrated. Arnold's good in it. This might be his last time as a Terminator.
I'll get into a lot more on Dark Fate because it'll shock you where it is on my list.
Oh, I have some shocking ones up top too.
I promise you'll be surprised where it is on my list.
Well, good. I like surprises. But yeah, I really hope this movie gets a better following as the years go on because I think it deserves it. Major flaws, but the good far outweighs the bad, I think. But again, I'm going to be saying this for a little bit. There are some other movies on this list that I like better. But still, it's a good one. So yeah, Terminator Dark Fate. Now what?
I'm still cracking up at her.
Oh, okay.
I think you guys have been talking to my family here. I'm going to have my way with this later. Twinkies! Gross! And they're strawberry. Oh, but they're unfrosted. Unfrosted Pop-Tarts fucking suck. Sucker!
Arnda. I ship Arnda.
So do I. My number 16, and we're about halfway through. So what the hell do you think it is?
I don't know.
Number 16 is The Predator. It really is just the most middle of the road movie in these franchises. 326. Yeah, it's just the most middle of the road. It's got great gore. It's got good effects when they're good. Who is that one person who said that? The effects are good, except when they're not.
Hey, real quick, you know what shocked the hell out of me? Do you know who Mr. Hat is? The reviewer. He reviews horror movies and whatnot. When he did the Predator franchise, The Predator was his third movie on there. He really liked it, and that I thought, wow, here's somebody who actually didn't hate the movie. But of course, then his number 2 was Predator. So, you know. Anyway, but yeah, I need to link his channel because he kind of reminds me of an older version of Joey. You know, Daikaiju Spacezilla. But anyway, back to your thoughts.
It's got good gore. The loonies are an entertaining bunch because they fuck, cock. The fucking autism. Huh?
Fuck me in the face with an aardvark.
That too. The autism plot point is dumb, is wrong, it's pointless, stupid, forced, bad. That's really the biggest. Rory is also incredibly annoying. The killing of the fugitive predator is incredibly annoying. But outside of that, The Predator, aside from its shitty-ass title, is a fun movie. It's a fun time. It's got good humor, good gore, good action scenes, and you can tell that Shane Black was really trying.
He wasn't responsible for what doesn't work in this movie, but given his track record, it seems like he was the one who contributed that to the movie. Because I think everything really good about it is Shane Black's input.
Continue.
So, it's my number 16?
Yep.
So, my number 16 is going to be Shrieker Island. Now, I think Nick made a... What? I think Nick made a lot of great points. And even though I've actually come around on A Cold Day in Hell slightly, in my heart of hearts, this feels like the proper sequel to Tremors 5 Bloodlines. It seems to have a lot of the same spirit. Unfortunately, it is lacking in the fact that it doesn't really deliver on the Shriekers.
Nope.
They should have kept the title of Island Fury because that describes the situation a lot more. I think Michael Gross is on top of his game as Bert. I mean, his death, allegedly at this point in time, we don't know if we'll ever see him again, but at this point in time, it seems to be the real deal. Some people think it just comes out of nowhere. I personally think that they actually foreshadow it quite a lot in this movie. So it kind of like with killing off Ripley in Alien 3. It's either going to work for you or it's not going to. But yeah, I just enjoy this much more than its predecessor. Again, a spiritual sequel to Bloodlines, more or less. They follow up on things that were mentioned in Bloodlines with Jasmine. So even if Travis isn't here, we have Jasmine to be some kind of continuation of that plot thread. And yeah, it's shot really well. I mean, when we do see our creatures, they look fine in terms of this new era and how it presents things. But yeah, if I'm doing a marathon of Tremors and I'm not feeling A Cold Day in Hell, I would probably go from Tremors 5 right to this one. So yeah, my number 16 is going to be Shrieker Island.
All right, now we're at number 15, and from here on out, these are all fantastic films. Well, let me be more specific. No, these are all movies I would consider to be some of my favorites of all time. So at this point, I'm not really going to repeat myself too much. I'll just say what's awesome about it and what it means to me. But starting off with number 15 is being the least rewatchable of all 15 of these movies is The Original Alien.
That's a little bit higher, but not much.
It is a phenomenal movie. It started off a fantastic franchise that got butt fucked in the end by its own creator. But that being said, it's got, amazing effects, good scares, fantastic pacing. It's the quintessential sci-fi horror film, aside from its sequel, which will be way higher on this list. Yeah, Alien is just an absolutely stunning film, and it also gave birth to one of the greatest strong female characters in all of sci-fi and horror and action. Moving on.
Yeah, not just that, but also one of the greatest monsters in cinema.
Oh yeah, of course.
And I think even though I like The Thing a little bit more, I think those two are a really good double feature, Alien and John Carpenter's The Thing. Okay, so my number 15, it's actually a bit above where Nick had it, just one step, but The Predator is actually my number 15. I'm not going to repeat myself too much because I think Nick said it all. The loonies are great. The tone, for the most part, is on par. Rory sucks, at least the way he was executed. He should have just been a little kid character like Newt. That would have been fine. But yeah, this for me is the spiritual Predator 3. If I'm in a Predator mood from now on, I'm probably going to watch Predator 2, and then this movie. So yeah, again, like Dark Fate, I'm hoping that as time goes on, this movie will be more appreciated in spite of its flaws, which are unfortunately always going to be there. But even then, hopefully Shane will get to release his alternate cut, or maybe we'll get to see at least footage from it. Maybe not as a movie, but just like scenes or whatever. But yeah, still, I think this is a lot more enjoyable than some people make it out, or most people make it out to be. So The Predator is going to be my number 15. You okay? Did I break you again?
No, I'm removing a dumb message.
Oh, okay. Oh, is it related to that?
No.
Okay.
It's related to something that is completely not related to what we're talking about.
Oh, okay. I got you.
Coming in at number 14 is The Original Tremors.
Oh, wow.
Not in no way am I saying that because it's only 14 is that I like it the least. That's not the case. It's a phenomenal movie. It's one of my favorite films. Gave birth to one of the greatest movie monsters of all time. It's just like with the original Alien, it's very prototypey. It's just the first of the franchise. I am not one of those people that say, "Oh, the first one is always the best." There's always room to improve. Like with Alien, it's a fantastic start, but there was some room to not necessarily improve, but just room to do more. Same with Tremors. Well, there because it had, well, no, because Alien had a smaller budget, but Ridley Scott did a lot more with that small budget. But still, there was more room to expand upon with the original Tremors. But the Graboids are awesome. It's got a great score, great characters, fun monster movie setting. It's just an entertaining as fuck monster movie. Love it.
Yes, indeed. It's going to be higher on my list, but we'll get there. So my number 14, and again, try not to fall over, Nick, but this is just where this happened to land, is Terminator 2.
I knew it.
Hey, but at least I'd be crazy if this was any lower. And to be fair, it needs to be. I've actually watched all the other movies in the Terminator series except for this one here recently. I need to give this another go. But I have to fall back on the fact that I just don't like, kind of like almost a mentality that you just talked about, where people say the first is the best. Even if a sequel happens to be one of those rare, quote unquote, movies that's praised about as much as the first movie or more, still that doesn't mean that you should just cut off giving any of the subsequent entries a chance.
Star Wars fans, are you paying attention?
Yeah, original trilogy people are definitely in that bracket.
The worst of that
listen,
bracket.
Yes, for sure. Listen, T2 is a great movie. It is cinema history. Lots and lots of good things about it. But I guess just what to explain why it's here is because, unfortunately, it's the fanboys, the Terminator fanboys. They pretty much worship the first two movies, and everything else, whether it's good or not, they just shit all over. And that really bugs me. And unfortunately, this movie, as good as it is used as the excuse or the champion of that mentality. So that's why it's low. But again, to second your thoughts, Nick, pretty much everything from 15 on up, these are quality movies, in our opinions, and I mean, and even an objective opinion too. So yeah, not much to say there because Nick is going to be the good cop in this situation. I don't hate the movie, but as it stands, I like.
Oh, I'll be the very good cop in this situation.
Oh yes, I figured. But yeah, T2 is going to be my 14. Good movie, but the fans have kind of not ruined it, but they have sullied it a little bit for me.
All right.
But hey, you were expecting it, so it's not totally a surprise.
Well, speaking of Terminator, my number 13 is Terminator Genesis. You need to look at Genesis solely as not a sequel, just as a complete reboot of the Terminator franchise. You need to look at it as its solo own adventure. If you try to connect it to the rest of the series, it's gonna fall apart almost instantaneously. Just look at it as its own standalone movie. And as a reboot to the Terminator franchise, this movie is a fun fucking time. Yes, it is the most sanitized Terminator movie. But what makes up for the lack of violence is the campiness, humor, and tone. It does help that this movie does have great action scenes. This movie has phenomenal special effects, but the humor and actually it is mostly the humor that really I think makes this movie stand out. Like with all the old man jokes with Arnold in this movie. I say in our review, Arnold's gotten older, but the filmmakers are aware of this and they're turning that into a joke, and it's funny. My auditory circuits have not degraded, however. I'm old, not obsolete. The T-3000 flipping John Connor and turning him into a bad guy, it's a good twist. And while I don't think the T-3000 is as powerful as I initially thought, I still do think this is one of the more formidable cyborgs that we've seen in the whole series, which I actually think this thing could probably defeat the Rev 9, in my opinion.
Probably could, yeah.
Yeah, the effects are great. The action scenes are spectacular. It's got a bitchin' soundtrack. It's just a fun movie. I don't get why people shit on this movie as much as they do. And I would have liked to see the rest of this trilogy pan out.
Yeah, me too.
Has the worst cliffhanger ending of the entire series, too, for the record.
Well, like I said in our review, if you get rid of the mid-credit scene,
it could have worked better as its own standalone movie.
Yeah, because it actually is kind of a great inverse of the first Terminator movie, where Sarah and Kyle are separated, but they defeated the Terminator. This is the inverse of that in the fact that Kyle and Sarah are together and alive, and they have a Terminator on their side. So it's a great flipping of what we got with the first movie, which makes it such a great reboot of it. And in comparison to some other movies we've discussed on this list already, like Predators, for instance, Predators just is so close to the original that it's a remake. This here, though, has a lot of homage to the original Terminator, but it still tells its own unique story.
Mm-hmm.
And it really delivers upon those fresh new elements. I mean, we got a Back to the Future Terminator movie with this. I mean, people should like that more, particularly like a Back to the Future 2, I think in particular, kind of thing going on. Again, like with some of the other ones we've discussed, I'm hoping that this gets a better reputation as time goes on. But anyway, I'm sorry, Nick. You finished what you were saying.
No, you're fine. That's all I had to say. Genesis is a fun movie. I don't think it's as bad as people say it is. I saw it in theaters opening day, and I had a good-ass time with it. And every time that I watch it, I have the same experience. It's a fun flick.
Yes, indeed.
John Connor talks too much.
More on that relatively soon here. But in the meantime, my number 13, not going to say a whole lot about this because Nick kind of said it in a nutshell. My 13 is going to be the original Alien. And I think the main reason is because I have included its 2 immediate sequels in my top 10. So, I figured this would be close to the top 10. But yeah, it just plants the seeds that those subsequent 2 movies deliver upon a lot more. The horror aspect of this movie is revisited with Alien 3, but the overall universe is explored better with Aliens. But still, again, the seeds are planted. This is a great double feature with John Carpenter's The Thing. This movie started a legacy. Unfortunately, its director, I'm not necessarily going to say creator because Dan O'Bannon and Ronald Shusett are the writers. So Ridley isn't quite like George Lucas with the Star Wars franchise.
True. Yeah, I keep forgetting about that.
So even if Ridley has kind of put the franchise in a precarious state currently, I mean, he still directed the hell out of this movie. Very influential. It's an all-time great. But as Nick can surely agree with me, well, in my case, I actually like both of its immediate sequels much better. But this led to better things. But it's still pretty high up there, and it's my number 13.
My number 12 is going to be Tremors the series. Fucking love this show. Minus the last the last 3 episodes being the worst of the whole series. Had those 3 episodes been snipped out, it would have been a perfect 10-episode run, relatively. But I love the shit out of this show. It's so fucking frustrating to no end for me that it seems like the studio was intentionally sabotaging this show. Just like with Firefly. But looking past that, if you just look at it as its own self-contained installment of the Tremors franchise, it's a better Tremors 4 than the actual Tremors 4. I love this show to death. It gives us more shriekers, gives us a bit more ass blasters, gives us great graboid action, and explores the variety of monsters that could have came out with the fantastic Mixmaster concept. Tremors the series is extremely underrated and extremely overlooked, frustrating so, because it kind of seems like people just choose to ignore the show in the Tremors fan base, annoyingly so. Installment in the entire franchise. Love it to death.
Or it just doesn't have enough recent exposure, so it's kind of being forgotten about, unfortunately. But it definitely does have some people who champion it in the fan base. But, excuse me, more on that very soon. But my number 12, and really this is only number 12 because once we factor Tremors and Terminator into this ranking, some of those entries are just going to be higher. But again, this was still pretty high up whenever it was just the 2 franchises, Alien and Predator. But my number 12 is going to be Predator 2. This is a great movie. Still fairly underrated, even though it has acquired a better following in the years since. 31 years. Again, like I mentioned calling back, there is a good amount of comparison, like with RoboCop and Predator, in the fact that the original movies both came out in 87. They're still the most beloved entries in those respective franchises. Predator 2 and RoboCop 2 came out in 1990. Apparently just didn't gel with anybody, but they have gotten better as time's gone on. And again, the best thing to say about this movie is that what was lacking, if you can say that, with the original movie, this movie expounds upon. Again, it's a great double feature with the first one. If you want more Predator, because the first one was introducing the Predator, this one delivers upon it. It's a vice versa situation. Predator 2 does something that Predator doesn't, and, again, vice versa. I guess probably also a subconscious reason why this is a bit lower than like the top 10 is because it did take me a while to get into this movie. And unfortunately, it was because of some lackluster FX showings. Or I think it was also, I might have watched it on AMC a couple times too. This movie does not play well on television.
Neither does The Predator, apparently.
Oh, man. I'll just mention again, talk about incomprehensible. I was astounded by how terrible the TV edit of The Predator is. It's just like, wow. If people watch that version of the movie, like they say, I didn't see it in theaters, but I'm going to catch up on it, they will absolutely hate it if they watch the TV edit. But anyway, Predator 2 is a lot better in that regard, but still lacking because, I don't know, it's just whatever they take out of it makes it a bit jarring and hard to follow, and also makes the experience less visceral. This was actually one of the most visceral entries early on, hence the fact that it was almost NC-17.
I'm pretty sure it's the only movie in this entire list that was almost NC-17.
Which also, unfortunately, gave it a reputation, sadly. You should just be able to judge the movie on its own merits, not just because of its an association with the rating, but whatever. It's a good flick. But as it stands, given the fact there's Terminator and Tremors movies factored into this ranking, it ended up at number 12. But I still love it to pieces. No pun intended.
My number 11 is RoboCop 2. Highly underrated sequel. I absolutely dig the shit out of this movie. The worst part about it is that damn reprogrammed RoboCop scene. If you were to take that movie out, I honestly would say it's on par equally with the original RoboCop movie. But that scene is just so bad and so cringy and so stupid, it takes me out of the film. But that being said, actually, it would have made the pacing a lot better, too, because Kane would have kicked RoboCop's ass, then he would have been rebuilt, and then he would have came back stronger than ever and whipped the living shit out of Kane, saying, hey, you can tear me apart, but I'll always be back, bitches. And it would have made the pacing a lot better. And it also probably would have snipped out about 20 minutes worth of footage. So even in there, the runtime would have been perfectly on par with the first film. But the gore is great. The action scenes are fantastic. The effects are really, really good. The number one greatest showcase of Phil Tippett's stop motion animation of his entire career in RoboCane, in my opinion. I don't care what anybody else says. His stuff with Ed 209 in the first RoboCop is good, slightly underutilized, and also slightly clunky. Here, it's smoothed out, refined, and it looks fantastic.
It's a very kinetic action scene and a great finale for the movie.
RoboCop 2 is a highly underrated sequel. It does a lot of things right. It does a couple things wrong. Even outside the shitty reprogrammed RoboCop scenes, it kind of feels like they're regressing RoboCop's character development from the first movie. He already rediscovered his identity, and it seems like he's got his old personality back, at least some of it. But then they hit the reset button, and then he's just the monotone, I'm sad cyborg. And also the really bad music score, which almost kind of kills the movie a little bit for me, because I don't like the score. You don't give me the epicness that is the RoboCop theme in one movie, and then the very next, where the RoboCop theme would have been awesomely utilized, you take it away, and you replace it with this incredibly stupid and cheesy RoboCop. Fuck you. But RoboCop 2, love it to death. Behave yourselves.
Murphy, you're reading Rights to a Corpse.
I'm having trouble.
Man, I think I actually kind of shafted the RoboCop movies. I'm going to need to give them an immediate rewatch. But
yeah, you
anyway.
Freaking twatata.
So my number 11 is going to be Tremors the series. Yeah, so a highly underrated piece of Tremors media. This is a much more preferable Tremors 4.
Probably the most underrated piece of Tremors media.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, some people, they criticize the fact that it gets away from the core monsters. But with all due respect, now that we've returned to the core monsters, those being graboids, shriekers, and ass blasters in recent years, maybe Stampede Entertainment would have known what to do with them, but it's clear that Universal doesn't really know what to do with them, because mainly the main theme of the recent 3 movies
is the graboids. Everything else is an afterthought.
Well, yeah, but also the main thing they do different is a change of scenery. Africa, the Arctic, or Africa again. Sorry. And then an island setting, which, I'm a sucker for island adventure movies, which is why probably I'll regress back into what I thought before and consider Shrieker Island the proper number 6, especially if I think of the series as the proper number 4. It's just the whole idea of continuing the story in a linear fashion. Tremors 4, necessarily the whole Western saying, it works or doesn't work for some people, but it also kind of throws you off because you go back instead of forward. And that's something that the series and then the movies after it have working for, is that you have a linear story that you're following. You're following Bert's journey to becoming probably one of the best cult icons, or cult classic icons in the genre, or 2 genres, sci-fi and horror. But yeah, the series has a lot of great unsung, fantastic things about it. Like I said in our review, or actually our ranking of the episodes, I think the 10 best episodes of the show make a good miniseries. They actually feel like they have a good ending, in my opinion, or good enough. But yeah, it's just a great show, a great entry in the franchise. Lots of good stuff with the core monsters, and then we get some new monsters, which just add to the mythos of perfection. It's great. I mean, that's the best thing I can say about it. It's great. And if you're getting into Tremors, do not skip over it.
Mm-mm.
Please seek it out and watch it. Get the DVD, because unfortunately streaming options drop off an episode for some reason. So, yeah. Anyway, Tremors the series is my number 11.
Top 10 territory. This is when things are gonna get really fun. Starting off with number 10 is Tremors 2. At one point in time, this was my favorite in the whole series. Now, the fact that it's only number 10 is not an insult by any means.
No.
Although, in hindsight, I will say the fact that this probably has the lowest budget of the entire franchise doesn't hurt the film per se, but it does rear its ugly head the worst. And the fact that whenever the Shriekers are on scene, they don't move, except their heads. The only time they walk around and move is when they're the shitty CGI models. And the lack of firearms in this movie, even when I was a kid, always drove me nuts. But that being said, the creep factor is at its highest with all the nighttime suspense scenes. This is probably S.S. Wilson's best directorial effort in the whole series. This is probably Jay Ferguson's best score, whom I now appreciate now much more as a film composer or a music composer. This is also when Bert was really starting to take shape and turn into cult classic icon. The Shriekers are great.
He's Reggie in Phantasm 2. He's started to make a bigger imprint.
Mm-hmm. The Shriekers are awesome and scary and creepy and threatening and great. The Graboids, they're slightly lacking, but again, I feel like it's just a carryover from the stuff that we had from Tremors 1 into Tremors 2. So if you keep that in mind, the threat is still there. They just don't show them very much. That's another element, though, because that's where the low budget does show its ugly head. Tremors 2 is just a masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. And also another thing, too, even more so with these top 10 movies, I definitely consider all of these to be some of my favorite films.
Yeah, and to your point about RoboCop 2, if RoboCop 2 is Phil's best work with Go Motion, unfortunately, the Shriekers in Tremors 2, the CGI ones, are some of his worst work, but it was also whenever he was making that shift over to a CGI company instead of a stop motion Go Motion company. So, yeah, it's interesting how we have two movies that show some of the best and worst of his work. But yeah. So my number 10 is going to be Tremors 3 Back to Perfection. And actually, kind of to second Nick's thoughts, I was really reflecting on the nostalgia I have for this movie. It's also an important entry in the franchise because whenever
Keep talking for a minute. I gotta go grab some laundry. Keep talking for a little bit.
Okay. So this was a good point. I mean, whenever I got into the Tremors franchise, it was a good point for me to do so because Tremors 3 was actually the brand new entry in the franchise at that time. So there was this great, not necessarily creative, but there was this kind of synergy going on where I was discovering this franchise and there was something new to consume, for lack of a better term. And it just, it hit the right notes at the time. In hindsight, it definitely feels like the pilot for the series. I mean, it pretty much is, even if that came 2 years later. You could, if you wanted to, you could edit this down into, or not even edit it down. It could be like a 2-part pilot episode for the series. But regardless, even if it is a step down from the first 2 movies, this still completes an arc, I guess you could say, for these early Tremors movies. I would say that the first 2 are the hardcore classics of the franchise, and Tremors 3 actually kicked off the second phase for the franchise. But still, Back to Perfection completes that arc that was going on with the first 3 movies, which was basically to establish that Burt Gummer was eventually the main character of this series. And I guess in that respect, that's an arc for those first 3 movies, that it establishes Burt, and then not including the series or Tremors 4, then you go from that and you set up the send-off for that icon. So yeah, it's largely nostalgia based. I mean, that's there for the first 4 movies and the series, regardless. Tremors, the series, the TV show. But yeah, I got to give the credit where credit's due. 3 is what cemented my undying fandom for the Tremors franchise, and it's an important movie in that respect in terms of how it speaks to my fandom. And yeah, I don't know what to say to Vamp, everybody, so I'm hoping that Nick comes back pretty soon.
It's quiet. Did I lose him? Nope. Yes. Okay, where did we leave off on? Oh, okay. All right, I think he was on his number 10. So I'll move on to my number 9. Now, my number 9 is going to be Alien versus Predator. Yeah, once again, not going to repeat myself too much. I really do love Alien versus Predator. I think it's probably the most underappreciated installment of both Alien and Predator franchises. It, yes, is very sanitized. The attempted George Lucas style unrated version kind of compensates for that. Lex is a great Diet Ripley. The special effects are absolutely phenomenal. The action scenes are great. It delivers on Alien versus Predator. Yeah, and it's got a fantastic lore and story. Yes, it would have been preferable if the original Alien versus Predator comics had been adapted into a movie. I think that would have been a really, really good story. And I just think it would have been overall more fan-friendly. But still, Alien vs. Predator in its current state is a damn fine movie, very entertaining, and highly underappreciated.
That was your number 9, right?
Uh-huh.
All right. My number 9 is going to be Tremors 5 Bloodlines. This is, unfortunately, one of those movies that seems to currently be getting a fair share of hate. Whether it's related to the lack of Stampede Entertainment's involvement or for some reason the inclusion of Jamie Kennedy. Yeah, this movie is kind of an unsung, really great reboot sequel. It's not a complete reboot like, say, Terminator Genesis.
No.
Even though some people mistake that movie for being like an actual Terminator 5, even if it is the 5th entry in the series, it's a straight up reboot. This movie, on the other hand, has connective tissue to the previous 3, or 1 through 3, I should say. And it does a great recap in the beginning, and then it gets back to the basics, but in a fresh way.
Mm-hmm.
It really harkens back to Tremors 2, but it has a nice, slick, modern aesthetic. There is a design choice that's not for everybody, the ass blasters. But the graboids they have a great new redesign. Initially, it was supposed to be a new subspecies, but as the movies went on, it was just a overall design choice. My headcanon is that they're still African graboids, and the ones in the other 2 movies, well, particularly Shrieker Island, they were smuggled down there. That's my headcanon. But yeah, Bert kind of become the main focus of the series with 3. And then there's even more so. If you're a Burt Gummer fan, Tremors 3 and 5 are probably going to be your favorite movies because he's just doing his thing, that and the series, most of the episodes anyway. And like I was saying with my little bit for Tremors 3, Tremors 1 through 3 established Bert as the icon, and then arguably 5 through 7, what they're trying to do, or what they end up doing, is sending off that icon. Whether it works for you is up for debate. As viewers have different opinions on it, but no, Tremors 5, I was very pleasantly surprised after the 11-year hiatus between 4 and 5. I was glad that they got back to the basics in such a great way, even if it wasn't the original creative team. I really hope that these biases the fan base has for it taper off. I mean, because there is a precedent for this. Tremors 3 and 4 used to be the ones that got picked on all the time. Now that there's new movies, they're the ones that get picked on. So, the whole ebb and flow thing going on. But, yeah, Nick, I'm going to let you get into it because you have a lot more to say. But, yeah, I definitely really enjoy Tremors 5.
You look like you're getting tired.
What?
You look like you're getting tired.
Oh, no. I'm okay.
All
but
right.
no, Tremors 5, it's a blast. That's why it's in the top 10. An unsung great movie in the franchise. I love it.
My number 8 is going to be the original RoboCop. Fucking love this movie. One of the greatest 80s sci-fi action movies of all time. It's like splitting hairs, Paul Verhoeven's best movie. I still give it to Total Recall, but damn, is RoboCop so close behind. Amazing special effects, fantastic action. Well, when they're good, the effects are fantastic. Great satire, great characters, great violence, great action scenes. RoboCop is a special movie, a very, very special movie. One of the most endlessly rewatchable movies of the 80s, or of all time for that matter. RoboCop is a kick-ass fucking movie.
Which I need to revisit.
Yep.
All right, so my number 8, and I'm not going to say a whole lot about it, is Terminator Salvation. Now, everything that Nick said is accurate, but I don't care because what this movie does well elevates it for me. And I think in our review that we did, which will soon be redone, and I will mention it there too.
Well, now it actually no longer exists. No offense, Trev. I got rid of it because it's going to be replaced.
No, it's fine. It was a rough debut, so I'm glad we're redoing it. But this movie is definitely lacking. Rating, some of the stars, the script just isn't 100% there. It's close.
The awful CGI reconstruction.
Yeah.
Oh, right, hun?
I'm glad. Go ahead.
Terminator Salvation's awful CGI Arnold Schwarzenegger from the 80s face. She just goes, oh.
I'm glad it was redone or tried again with Genesis because it's a lot better there.
Yes.
Although time will tell whether that holds up or not. But no, really what it is for Salvation, I have this headcanon where I think that if Terminator 2, 3, Dark Fate didn't happen, this could work as a sequel that illustrates all the things that Kyle was talking about in the original Terminator. And then from there, unfortunately, the direct connective tissue isn't there, but in theory, you could go from Salvation to Genesis and tie everything up in a bow. Again, I'll get into that whenever we do the review for Salvation again, because it's an article I wrote for Ficto. But yeah, really what it is for Salvation, in spite of its shortcomings, is just the fact that this is a good avenue for the series to go in. Whether you like some of the other ones more or not, there is an undeniable problem I feel, with Chi-Chu, T3, Genesis to an extent, and Dark Fate, is that they kind of rinse and repeat the formula. At least with Salvation, going into the future is a fresh avenue to take, and there's just great possibilities to explore with what we imagined with what Kyle was telling Sarah in the original movie. Again, I think I'm not the only one. I mean, probably maybe the only one to have pieced together a trilogy of the original Salvation and Genesis. But I do feel that if you're a fan of the first movie in particular, there's lots of good stuff in Salvation for those fans, and that's probably why it's so high up there. So yeah, shortcomings aside, it's really just the concepts that elevate this one for me. Marcus is also good. It's actually one of Sam Worthington's best roles, in my opinion. And sadly, he kind of shits on it, just like he does Clash of the Titans, just because not everybody loved it. It's like stand by what worked, man.
Well, I mean, Clash of the Titans.
No, I'll agree with him on that. But
did kind of suck.
Yeah, like I said, I'll agree with him on that. But Salvation, it's probably one of his most memorable roles, at least in my opinion, when it comes to Sam Worthington. Maybe that's just me, but I don't know. Marcus is a highlight. So yeah, Salvation is going to be my number 8, and more on that sometime in the future.
My number 7 is gonna be Terminator Dark Fate. This one has, huh?
That's not as high as I thought. You had me thinking it was going to be like top 3 or something.
Well, no, there's just 6 more movies that I like more than this, but
it just feels right.
Yeah.
When it comes to following the first 2.
Yeah. So Dark Fate has greatly gone up as far as rating goes, as far as I'm concerned. My issues with it still stand. Every single issue that I talk about in our review, which I'm going to pat myself on the back and say that's like one of our top 10 best reviews since my relaunch of my channel. Huh?
One of the earliest ones too.
Yep. All of my issues stand. Grace is a bitch, an unlikable, snobby, feminazi bitch. Danny is useless, pointless, cringy, and mean-spirited as fuck.
Unconvincing.
And very unconvincing. But, damn it, the good things about Dark Fate are fucking phenomenal. The R rating is welcomed back with open arms. The music is fantastic. It brings back the Cameron feel, despite Tim Miller's direction.
Well, he produced it, so, you know, there
Linda
it is.
Hamilton is a welcome addition. Arnold is awesome. Yes, unfortunately, this probably is going to be the last time we see Arnold as the Terminator.
It's not terrible, though.
It's not a bad final outing, but I still say there could have been more.
Genesis is probably a bit more fun. Gives him more fun things to do. But Carl's okay.
He's fine. I don't agree with what my father-in-law says. Like, this movie turned him gay.
Oh, not at all. Where the hell's that come from?
Well, he also thinks that all of the protesters that stormed the Capitol were all paid actors by Antifa.
Yeah.
Right. Moving on. Dark Fate is a fucking good movie. Could it have been better? Yeah, somewhat. Is it
came too late?
A little bit, unfortunately. Yeah, I think it just came a little too late. Had it been like damage control, quote unquote, from the studio to make up for Genesis, even though I like Genesis, Or had they made this a straight up sequel to Genesis, I think it would have gone down a little bit better. But the Terminator fan base are an evil bunch of bastards, and they just tore this movie to shreds. And it breaks my heart that this movie underperformed. No, it didn't just underperform, it bombed.
It might be the last Terminator movie, but at least the franchise will continue, allegedly, at least in anime form. So at least we got that. So, was that it, Nick?
Yep. Dark Fate's a good movie. Fuck off.
Yeah, I agree. My number 7 is going to be Genesis. And it is sanitized. It is the AVP1 of the Terminator franchise, which isn't a bad thing necessarily in terms of overall quality. But yeah, it's just all the homage to the first one. And there is a little bit of 2 in there. There's the there's the Dysons, there's the T1000. Those are all sprinkled in there. But again, like we were saying earlier, you can tell it's a reboot because what they do with that T2 stuff doesn't line up with what happened in T2. They're doing their own thing with it. Also, the date. The date is the one that is given early on in T2. The date for Judgment Day, I'm sorry. The date for Judgment Day is what is given early on in T2, and that changes by the end of T2. So Genesis can't follow, continuity-wise, the first 2 movies. It's really just a mesh of those 2 and telling its own story, hence why it's a good reboot. But yeah, it's all the homage. This made me really nostalgic for the first movie whenever I saw it in theaters. There's just some great stuff to enjoy here if you're a fan of the overall franchise. Even if you're a fan of the first 2, it mainly, for lack of a better term, it jerks those off pretty much. Mostly the first one. So really, if you're not just being a stick in the mud, you should love this, or at the very least like this movie if you like the first 2. So yeah, I don't get it. But yeah, we did a review. It's a good review on it. But yeah, Genesis is going to be my number 7.
My number 6 is Predator 2. Fantastic movie with fantastic effects. Yeah, the third act runs a little bit out of steam, but I actually think really now that's just the biggest. It's the biggest and sole issue. The nitpick of the Predator just keeps discarding his weapons. It's annoying for me because me being a weapons nut, I would not want to lose my weapons. But it's just like it bugs me if I let it bug me. Fantastic gore, great action, great, better budget, excellent expansion on the Predator lore. A good Lethal Weapon vibe, especially for me because I am a Lethal Weapon fan. I dig the shit out of Predator 2. I think it's a highly underrated installment.
My number 6, and this actually was, I think, a step higher whenever I initially did this, but my number 6 is actually going to be the original Predator. Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and say I think objectively Aliens just goes a notch or 2 further. That's why it's higher up on my list now. But yeah, this introduced my favorite of the 2 creatures that are featured in the AVP franchise, the Predator or the Yautja. It's a great Arnold Schwarzenegger action vehicle, even if you don't focus on the monster. I mean, it's basically a good companion piece to Commando.
Yep.
I mean, that's really what started this whole thing off, is that Nick watched Commando, and then he wanted to watch Predator after that, and then here we are. It's just,
lo and behold, it's funny the rabbit holes you go down.
Exactly. The breadcrumbs, that's where they led. It's a classic, something that I've come to appreciate. It's just a little minor thing. I never noticed it until somebody pointed it out online. It basically redoes the beginning of John Carpenter's The Thing with the alien ship coming towards the planet. The only difference is the title card happens before. we see the ship. But it is a nice
Yeah,
little,
it does.
Yeah. Somebody pointed that out online. I was like, son of a bitch. That makes me like it even more. But also, I mean, those two, really, The Thing, Alien, and Predator all have, and Aliens, they just have a similar spirit, a similar synergy going on with them, where, if we didn't get anything else from any of these movies, they would be a good quartet. You'd have the first two Alien movies, and then you'd have The Thing and Predator, and that would be like quintessential 80s sci-fi action horror movies, in my opinion anyway. I realize I'm not talking about the movie itself a whole lot, mainly its legacy, but I mean, yeah, it's just a classic.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's obviously why it's number 6.
Top 5 territory. We're going to have a lot of heavy hitters with one weird one out as far as a lot of other fans are concerned, but whatever. This is my list. Number 5 is The Original Terminator.
This was number 1 on your ranking video you did for the franchise. The last one you did.
Not taking anything away from The Original Terminator. It is a phenomenal movie. The thing about it, though, Christ, is it 80s.
That's what I love about it.
I love it too, but it's weird because this isn't necessarily a flaw, but the last time I watched it, it just really stuck out to me that you can tell this was... Well, I know this wasn't James Cameron's directorial debut because he did Piranha 2. But had this been James Cameron's directorial debut, you would have been able to tell. Because it's extremely prototypey. Like, extremely prototypey. It's probably, like, of Predator, Alien, Tremors, and RoboCop, The Original Terminator is the number 1 most prototypey of all of these franchises, in my opinion. It does show its budget, not in a bad way, but you can just tell this didn't have a mammoth budget. But that's also what's astonishing is that James Cameron managed to make a perfect blend of an 80s action movie, an 80s sci-fi movie, just an 80s movie in general.
Yeah.
And it's also very much so an 80s horror movie. Well, loosely an 80s horror movie because it's not a straight out slasher movie, but its formula is very much so like a slasher movie. You have an unstoppable killer going on a rampage all throughout a city, killing off its victims one by one in various methods. And every time you think that he's dead, he pops right back up again. Very much like a slasher villain. Almost like Jason. And the Friday the 13th movies were popular at this point. Nothing really bad to say about the original Terminator. It just is a phenomenal movie, but it just is so prototypey.
Yeah, I can see that. So my number 5, and this is actually quintessential Cameron along with the Terminator, is Aliens. And well, I mean, it's the top 5. It's number 5, so yeah, it's still there. Yeah, this movie is just firing on all cylinders. Again, it just captures the best of that spirit for movies of that time that were of this type. It is obviously not for some people, but they're a minority. It's elevated above Alien. I mean, it takes. I mean, there are some people out there who still prefer the first one to this one.
Oh, okay. Like I thought you were like alluding to there's people that shit all over it.
Oh no! I mean, I'm sure there is, but those people are like the most, like the greatest minority on the face of the earth. Let's just say that.
The
yeah,
people
I mean,
that never leave their angry masturbation corner.
exactly. I'm not even sure what they would be angry about. I don't know. That just leaves me speechless. I mean, yeah, I don't know what else. I don't know what else to say about it because I mean, I'm sure you're about to get into it, but it's just. Here's what I'll say. It's perfect sci-fi horror in a nutshell. And I'll let you take it away here in a sec.
My number 4 is The Original Predator. I do think this is a bit better than Terminator. It is prototypey, but only really in one aspect, in that it's one aspect of the effects, and that's the invisibility. Outside of that, this really doesn't feel very prototypey at all. This feels very refined, especially for a debut of a franchise. If this feels well, it does help that the plot and story is very, very simple, but that adds to its benefit. It makes it feel kind of timeless, and it doesn't feel so prototypey compared to the rest of the franchise. This was like the standard that the franchise set, and it kind of like with Alien, there was nowhere else to go but up. Great action scenes, fantastic special effects, except for the invisibility effects. They're not terrible. They're just obviously very prototypey and dated. Fantastic cat and mouse game all throughout the movie. Great characters, great gore. The Original Predator is one hell of a classic 80s movie.
Yes, sir. And it's actually also, I think, aside from Commando, if you want to go on the monster side of things, Aliens is probably the best movie to watch with it. So in that regard, it continues that spirit. And yeah, like you said, it would, in that regard, be elevated above the first Terminator.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I've actually figured out your top 3. I don't know if you figured out mine yet, but yeah.
No, I haven't. I have no clue.
Oh, okay. All right. So my number 4 is going to be Tremors 2, Aftershocks. And really, why this is so high up, because really, if I did my top 4 for Tremors, it would probably be the first 3 movies and then Bloodlines. Or not? Did I say top 4? Yeah, that would be my top 4. So in that regard, I just have to fall back on the fact that Tremors 2 is undoubtedly probably next to 3, and then after that is the first one. Is the one I'm the most nostalgic for. It's actually the first one that I watched. I watched a recorded tape of it, and I watched it on TV a fair amount of times. It's one of those movies that it's happens to be one of those movies that it's one where I saw it as a kid, like a little kid, and was thinking, what the hell is that? I have to know more about that. And it's that scene where the graboids start to change into the Shriekers. The last time the Tremors franchise was truly scary, that's one reason why this is so high up there, because it still has that creep factor. As Nick has said before in our review, and even mentioned here in the ranking, it's just spine-tingling. And sadly, that effect quickly disappeared after this. Maybe echoes of it here and there, like in 3 in the series, and 4 a little bit. Unfortunately, as fun as 5 is, it doesn't have any of that creep factor, but it has the fun factor in spades.
To say the least.
Tremors 2 is probably the other half of that truly classic period for the franchise. I mean, there was still some time in between the first and the second movie, but man, they're like a great 2-parter. I say it's like the second half of the classic era for Tremors, because Tremors 3 was kind of a revival.
Mm-hmm.
It led into the series, and then 4, and that was a nice little period before it went on hiatus again. But yeah, Tremors 1 and 2 are the classics of the franchise, kind of like with really all the ones that we're talking about. The first 2 tend to be undoubtedly just the highest note for the franchises in general, if not for most people's opinions, I guess you'd say. But yeah, it's a great monster movie. Still a great fave of mine, and that's why it ended up number 4 on here.
My number 3 is Tremors 5. Fucking adore this movie. Yep, still my favorite Tremors movie. The fun factor is cranked up to 99 out of 10. It's a great reboot sequel. It's a great reintroduction. Bird is awesome. The graboids are awesome. Action scenes are great. I don't know how this is an even lower budget project than the previous Tremors movies. Like, what the fuck? Yes, the hostile takeover nature of Universal with these movies is a little off-putting. Like, it just kind of makes you think, God, why? What? Whatever.
It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate because it creates a rift in discussions about the movie.
Sadly.
Because then you have people who are on this side of the fence, and then everybody else is on this side. Or you could have people who are in between, like you and me, who are like, can we just enjoy these things and not be tribal? I don't know.
Yeah, I love Tremors 5. It's such a fucking unsung masterpiece as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I concur, absolutely. Top 3. Let's see.
Well, 2 for me.
My number 3 is going to be the original Tremors. And I'm going to be brief. Here's the thing. And it utilizes all the aspects of this franchise the best, in my opinion. It's as fun, in my opinion, as number 2 and 5. It also has the creep factor that 2 retains.
And
it's
perfects.
Just the beginning. That's right. It's just the beginning of something great. And, I hate to fall back on that age-old belief that whatever plants the seeds is the greatest. I'm not going to fall back on it entirely, but without this first movie, whatever we enjoy about later sequels wouldn't have happened. And I just feel like the pedigree, if you could call it that, for a studio monster movie was there with this one. And unfortunately, it just was kind of lessened with each subsequent entry. Again, Tremors 5 brought it back pretty good. To be honest, if I wasn't feeling nostalgic, I would actually say it's 1 and 5 as the objective best of the whole series. But yeah, I don't know what else to say. This is a classic that's not entirely unsung, but it's definitely one of the major, it's one you hear about a lot in the cult classic circuits. I mean, it gets mentioned constantly. So even if it's not like something on par with Aliens or Predator, at least in the pop culture, or even the first 2 Terminators, even if it's not on that on that level, it still gets talked enough about that it really should be, at least in my opinion. So yeah, Tremors is my number 3.
My number 2 is Aliens. What can I say about this movie that hasn't been said enough already? It's one of the greatest sequels ever made. It's one of my favorite films of all time. It's got some of the best practical effects and great utilizations of a surprisingly low-ish budget for a sequel that manages to accomplish so much in one of the most talented and unsung directors, despite all of his praise in Hollywood. Fantastic expansion, great monsters, great mother-daughter dynamic with Ripley and Newt, and the perfection of the Ripley character in Aliens. This is a special movie to me and many other people.
So, not to shit on what Nick just said, because some people might think that I am by having this as my number 2, but my number 2 is going to be Alien 3. Yeah. So really what it is, Aliens was almost number 2, but the way I'm feeling right now, I was leaning towards Alien 3. Really, for some people, these two movies, their relationship with each other, they either contradict each other in terms of what one establishes and then what the other does with it, or in my case, they go together pretty damn good. There are some choices that are made, which Nick elaborated on already, so I'm not going to repeat. You either love them or you don't, or you're either okay with them or you're not. Excuse me. But yeah, just the main thing to say about this one, it is a solid conclusion, if you want it to be, for that trilogy of movies, Alien, Aliens, and this. And the way I feel about it is the way that Nick feels about Logan. So, I just had to put as high as it is right now because it's just unique. I want this opinion to stand out, and I don't want to just, because with a lot of these in the top 5, we kind of run the risk of really not being able to say much, because a lot of these movies, what you can say about them has already been said, even as good as they are. So,
which, actually, you can talk about your number 1 first.
Okay, yeah. But yeah, just to wrap up on Alien 3, it's so high for me because it's just special. I don't know what it is, and it's a good conclusion. Just for me personally, it's my Logan, I guess you could say. All right, so my number one is going to be the original The Terminator. And I was actually kind of happy whenever you did your initial ranking and this ended up number 1. But really, it's okay for this one and its sequel to be interchangeable because they're both really damn good. I think one has created an unfortunate attitude in the fan base, but that's just people being dumb, to say the least. Really, the reason why The Terminator is number 1 for me is that I feel like it is kind of a great mix of all these different things that I like.
Sci-fi, action, horror.
Exactly. The horror element is, exactly. The horror element is like slashers. And I like slashers, at least the ones who are supernatural. I don't particularly care for ones that don't have any abilities, because then they're not really fun monsters. They're not fun monsters. They're real monsters, and those aren't fun, to say the least. It does that. I mean, there's a painting that James Cameron did for this movie with the endoskeleton lurching towards Sarah. I mean, we don't see Sarah in this picture, but it's basically a slasher pose for the endoskeleton. It's basically that end moment where it's trying so desperately to get to Sarah, but in this case, it has a knife. It's a really good painting because James Cameron's actually, this is an unsung part of his talent. He's a really damn good artist. And if you haven't, people listening and Nick, you should look up like his illustrations and concept art for things. Really good stuff. But yeah, I like the story with Kyle and Sarah the most in this. It never seemed like a no-brainer for John Connor to become the focus of the movies, because arguably that didn't turn out so well in subsequent installments, because he either was a victim, somebody trying to escape his destiny, kind of just an okay military leader. I'm looking at you, Christian Bale, John Connor.
Or a whiny teenage drama bitch.
Yeah. And then even whenever he was a great, charismatic adult John Connor, then that was the point where they thought, we have to shake it up somehow, and that's why he became the T-3000. So that rubbed some people wrong. And then Dark Fate, they just killed him off. So, in a way, it makes it simpler if it's just the story of Kyle and Sarah, at least for me. I mean, I'm glad that we got what we got in the subsequent movies, but at the same time, if this had been a one-off, I think it would have been still a solid sci-fi action horror movie from the 80s. Definitely still one of the all-time greats. It is a classic. I love the music in this one in particular. I mean, Brad Fidel, is it Fidel or Fidel?
I think it's Fidel, but I've heard it pronounced Fidel.
Yeah. Anyway, he does great scores for both this and T2, but this one has the edge for me. This just is a complete 100% package for me. It again, it's mainly the fact that it dips into various genres, and it's just one of those times where it's a good mix of all of them, at least in my opinion. And also stop motion endoskeleton for the win.
So that is another area where the film does show its budget a little bit, because it's cool, but it is a bit jittery and it's a bit prototypey and clunky, even more so than the original RoboCop. But like I say a lot, I feel like James Cameron knew that, and so he didn't really focus on it that much. He just showed it off as long as it needed to be shown, and then he moved on to something else.
Well, yeah, and even if they didn't do that, they could have just used the close-ups of Stan Winston's practical animatronic.
True, yes.
That would have been okay. Wouldn't have been as dynamic, but anyway, I think I know what your number one is.
Okay, so me doing this is not simply going along with the crowds. I don't give a fuck about what the crowds think. I really don't. This is my opinion. This is my view. This is my list based on my personal tastes, because I grew up with these franchises. There's a few reasons why I have these franchises in this list. One is that I grew up with them. Two, they're all franchises that majority of which me and Trev have reviewed.
Yep.
And three, there is just a lot of connective tissue and a lot of vibes that all of these franchises share. The least of which being Tremors. But it would be kind of cool to see Predator and Tremors cross over.
Yeah, it's also hard, really. This has been a struggle as a Tremors fan to find a sister or sibling franchise for Tremors, because at first I think, oh, Jurassic Park, that might be the closest thing, but even that has a higher profile in pop culture than Tremors, so it doesn't 100% fit. But yeah, in terms of how much I love them, yeah, I think these 5 franchises are pretty much on par, as unfortunately this ranking seems to prove. RoboCop is the least, but again, I need to refresh myself on those. But yeah, I second those sentiments that this is actually probably the best ranking we can do in terms of similar films. But go on.
And they're also, I'm almost done, hon. They're also some of those franchises that, aside from Godzilla and kind of Kong, these are the biggest franchises that I grew up with as a child. I saw a lot of these movies, like the early ones, at a very young age. The oldest of which being this one I'm about to talk about right here. And this is the one that I have the most nostalgia for, the most pleasant feelings for, and the one that I just really feel like is kind of my safe zone, and the movie that I can endlessly rewatch, be transported back to various points in my life when I was young, watching its shitty theatrical cut. Kind of gives it away, but just please bear with me. Transports me back to when I first watched its extended cut and was blown away once again, because I felt like I was watching a whole new movie. Back to when I watched the rest of the franchise, when I watched, at the time, every single installment in one whole sitting. And it even takes me back to the most recent time that I watched it, when I first moved into this place. My number one and my favorite of all of these franchises is Terminator 2, Judgment Day. One of the greatest movies of all time. Debatably, the greatest sequel of all time. Debatably, Arnold Schwarzenegger's best movie. James Cameron's second best film, in my opinion, because Avatar is still my all-time favorite film, and I do think that is his best movie. But Terminator 2 just comes so damn close. One of the greatest sci-fi films of all time, one of the greatest action movies of all time. I absolutely love Terminator 2. It's just such a masterpiece of modern-day cinema, even 90s cinema. And people say that the 90s were a shit decade for movies. Hello? This came out in 91, and Jurassic Park came out 2 years later.
Those people are pricks. Fuck them.
Now, yes, I will agree very strongly with Trev on one thing. The fact that this movie is so good, it is frustrating as a Terminator fan who likes more than just the first two films. It is frustrating that because this one is so good, it casts a gigantic shadow. And it just seems like the filmmakers try to escape that shadow, but the fans refuse. No, I'm good. The fans refuse to let the rest of the franchise escape this movie's shadow. This movie has such a high standard, which it deserves to have. It does deserve to have all the praise. It deserves the praise, deserves the acclaim. It deserves this high standard. It's just so frustrating that people so unfairly compare the rest of the Terminator franchise to this movie. I just feel like you should just ignore this. Well, it's weird. Because I do say ignore it, but I also don't say ignore it. Because, yes, keep it in mind, but don't so harshly compare the rest of the franchise to this. Because it just kind of seems like you're showing your hands and your bias towards T2. But you're just also just copping out and going along with the crowd. But you're also just not even giving the rest of the franchise a chance to do its own thing and come into its own identity. Because fans also don't like it when the movies try to emulate T2. Look at T3. That's movie's biggest issue, is that it's trying so hard to emulate T3 that becomes its own identity, and that's a bad identity because it's Diet T3 or it's Diet T2. Let the rest of the franchise try to be its own thing and give it some room to breathe. Give them a chance. Stop harshly comparing them to T2. Now, me saying all this, like I said, is not taking any of the praise away from Terminator 2. It is a masterpiece of modern-day cinema. It is a phenomenal movie. But as a Terminator fan that likes stuff more than Terminator 2, well, more of the franchise other than Terminator 2, it's just really annoying when I hear 99% of the Terminator fan base say T2 is the best. There's that 1% that says T1 is the best, which I've heard a few of those. But like what Trev says, it's either 1 or it's 2. Everything else is garbage. That's not true at all. So yes, it is frustrating to listen to the fan base be so butthurt and be such a bunch of fucking diet Star Wars fans and say, oh, the second one's the best. The second one's the best. Everything else sucks. Shut up.
It's like, where's the variety, man? What a boring conversation. I mean, yeah, there's lots to talk about with T1 and T2. But I mean, regardless of whether you think they're crap or not, everything from Rise of the Machines on adds some variety to the franchise. And that's how it keeps on going. Whether you think it should have died a long time ago or not is a subjective opinion. And if you don't care for it, just please go on about your business and let the people who do want to talk about the new stuff talk about it.
Don't be gatekeepers. Don't be Star Wars fans.
Rabbit holes.
That being said, post your fucking comments down below and let me know what you think. Hit the like button and hit the subscribe button and share this video with your friends. That is the end of the longest fucking video that I have ever done. Jeez. Worth it, though, because this was a lot of fun to do. It's got me already in the mood to rewatch a whole bunch of these movies.
Yes. Essentially RoboCop, in my case.
Trev, you got anything to plug? And I think I pissed off my wife by this being so long.
Well, I'll just say real quick. Again, I recorded the audio, I think, about 2 weeks ago now. I need to ask him about it, but I have a review with Daikaiju Spacezilla in the pipeline for Godzilla and Godzilla King of the Monsters 1956. So that's going to be coming at some point because the audio's out there. That's what I got coming in the pipeline.
Look forward to our next video. And as always, go out and watch some of your favorite fucking movies and just make yourself happy. And I will see you guys in the next video.